Chapter 1929 Friendly? Hearing what Emperor Bai said, Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. He felt that Emperor Bai was right. Although Lineage of Star had won a great victory in the war, the two alliances would still possess fierce power if they were to reconstruct their teams. If Lineage of Star were to fight against the two alliances outside the galaxy formation, Lineage of Star really wouldn't stand much chance. As for destroying the major forces, it really was impossible. Emperor Bai, I promise you that Lineage of Star will not find trouble with the two alliances for now. However, if the two alliances were to find trouble with us, you couldn't blame me for that, Jian Wushuang said. Don't worry. As long as the two alliances aren't dumb, they should know what to do. Plus, Sanctuary Alliance will definitely send great emperors to give them warning personally, Emperor Bai said with a smile. Emperor Bai paused and continued. The last condition. I'd like to know, where did Emperor 13 come from, and how is he related to you? Emperor 13? Jian Wushuang was stunned, then he flashed a bitter smile. Emperor Bai, to be frank with you, Emperor 13 and I merely met once, and we are not related to each other at all. However, when we first met, I am not sure why, but he left a mark in my body. This time, when I am in danger, he rushed over to me via the mark. As for his origins and why he helped me, I really have no idea. Jian Wushuang was stating the truth. He really didn't know anything about Emperor 13. The only thing that he knew was that Emperor 13 was an ancient expert, and he was from the ancient battlefield in his hometown. However, he would definitely not tell Emperor Bai about the ancient battlefield located in his hometown. I see. Emperor Bai creased his eyebrows. Emperor 13 is definitely a super expert from ancient times. He would save you and urge me to take care of you. It meant that he was related to you, but you have no idea why. Forget it. Ancient time was a secret to begin with. The ancient experts were mysterious. Emperor Bai smiled faintly. From his reply, it was obvious that he had once met an ancient expert, and probably more than one. Jian Wushuang, as you agreed with all the conditions that I brought up, I shall give you the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, Emperor Bai said as he flipped his hand and took out a gray bead. Jian Wushuang's heart quivered at the sight of the gray bead. He was very familiar with the gray bead. From the beginning of cultivation skill until every step of inverse cultivation skill, they were all contained in a gray bead. The gray bead was extremely mysterious, and Jian Wushuang had yet to find out what mysterious raw material the gray bead made of. The 7th step of inverse cultivation skill is in the bead. Take a look. Emperor Bai passed the gray bead to Jian Wushuang directly. Jian Wushuang took it and briefly went through it. He was thrilled. He knew that it was really the 7th step of the inverse cultivation skill. Thank you, Emperor Bai. Jian Wushuang quickly thanked. You're welcome. Emperor Bai waved his hand. Emperor Bai, let me bring you to Lineage of Star's Scripture Depository to accept the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace, Jian Wushuang said. All right, Emperor Bai nodded. Under Jian Wushuang's lead, Emperor Bai arrived at Scripture Depository and started receiving the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace. Very soon, Emperor Bai walked out from Scripture Depository after inheritance had been completed. Emperor Bai, how did it go? Jian Wushuang asked with a smile. Secret skill of Star Palace is unfathomable. Although I received all 3 volumes, I'm afraid I could only cultivate the first volume. Emperor Bai smiled faintly. Emperor Bai could only cultivate the first volume as well. Jian Wushuang was surprised. It was as though everyone found it difficult to cultivate the secret skill of Star Palace. Most of them could only cultivate the first volume. Some couldn't even cultivate the first volume after they received the inheritance. As for the Master of Star Palace, he absorbed a drop of blood essence that belonged to an expert of 7-star black sect by chance. Hence, he successfully cultivated the second volume. However, Jian Wushuang didn't find the secret skill difficult. When he cultivated it, it could be considered smooth sailing. He had even cultivated the third volume. It inevitably made Jian Wushuang felt surprised. After Emperor Bai had received the inheritance, he didn't stay back any longer. In the galaxy, the experts from Lineage of Star, led by Jian Wushuang, came to farewell Emperor Bai. Jian Wushuang, this is my communication token. If you come across any problem in the future, you can send me a message. Emperor Bai gave Jian Wushuang his communication token before he left. The surrounding experts were surprised at the sight. Especially Purple Moon Emperor. He felt a complicated feeling, and he was looking at Jian Wushuang in jealousy. One should know that Emperor Bai was the strongest person in Sanctuary Alliance, and he was always aloof and set himself high. The experts from Sanctuary Alliance, including the great emperors, only 2 or 3 of them had his communication token. Great emperors on the bottom of the level, like Purple Moon Emperor, never once had it. If he were to be looking for Emperor Bai, he had to look for someone to pass the message. But then, Jian Wushuang had received Emperor Bai's communication token. Plus, Emperor Bai was normally cold to others, even to great emperors. However, he was extremely friendly to Jian Wushuang. Purple Moon Emperor was even more confused. After Emperor Bai left, Purple Moon Emperor immediately came forward. Jian Wushuang, congratulations. Emperor Bai's communication token. Even I don't have it. Purple Moon Emperor smiled, and his attitude was entirely different from before. When he had been talking to Jian Wushuang earlier, he had referred to himself with an honorable pronoun. Then he had only referred to himself as I. Purple Moon Emperor, you must be joking. I am only lucky. Plus, Emperor Bai seems to be an easy person to talk to. Jian Wushuang smiled. An easy person? Purple Moon Emperor smiled awkwardly. Jian Wushuang really found Emperor Bai friendly and easy to talk to. At least, during their conversation earlier, Emperor Bai didn't put on bureaucratic airs, nor did he impose anything on him. For instance, Emperor Bai could make Lineage of Star hand him the secret skill of Star Palace with one order. For Lineage of Star, and the 2 alliances to stop the war. It could also be only ordered by Emperor Bai. However, Emperor Bai didn't force the order, but traded with him for the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. Even when he told Jian Wushuang to stop Lineage of Star from fighting with the 2 alliances, he weighed the pros and cons on Jian Wushuang's behalf, and let Jian Wushuang make the final decision. Then, Emperor Bai took the initiative to give him his communication token. Even Jian Wushuang was surprised himself. Could it be because Emperor 13 wanted Emperor Bai to take care of me? And that's why Emperor Bai is gentle to me. Jian Wushuang was confused. That's not right. Although Emperor 13 is powerful, there's no need to curry favor with me, right? Chapter 1930 in peace. Although Jian Wushuang was confused, he didn't bother to think about it further. Sword Emperor. Everything is settled and I shall bid you farewell. Purple Moon Emperor said. Thank you, Great Emperor, for helping. Jian Wushuang and Lineage of Star will remember this. Jian Wushuang expressed his gratitude. Haha, don't mention it. Purple Moon Emperor let out a hearty laugh. Then he turned to leave. As for Qian Mingzi, he naturally followed Purple Moon Emperor. Hall Master Yuan. Jian Wushuang looked at Hall Master Yuan by the side. Send down an order. Tell the experts of Lineage of Star to take back Star Land. Yes, Hall Master Yuan nodded. Palace Master, how about the 2 alliances? Hall Master Nyeyun asked. The 2 alliances retreated, and the war has ended for now, Jian Wushuang answered. Ended? We are letting the 2 alliances off the hook just like that. Hall Master Nyeyun's eyebrows were tightly knitted, and there was obviously reluctance in their eyes. Hall Master Yuan and Hall Master Gu Exine were upset too. Although Lineage of Star had won a great victory in the war, the 2 alliances weren't wiped off. Could it be because of Sanctuary Alliance? Hall Master Yuan turned to look at Jian Wushuang, not only because of Sanctuary Alliance, but also because Eternal Chaotic World isn't peaceful for a while. Jian Wushuang said calmly. I have already reached a mutual agreement with Emperor Bai. Lineage of Star will stop fighting with the 2 alliances for now. After some time, when Eternal Chaotic World regains its stability, we will fight with them again. I understand. Hall Master Yuan nodded. Go ahead. Jian Wushuang waved. Although the 2 alliances aren't wiped out, Lineage of Star has survived the war and our danger has been resolved. The skies clear up after a storm. After this war, Lineage of Star will reach a brand new level after all. Most importantly, from today, there won't be anyone in Eternal Chaotic World Who dares to cast greedy eyes over the secret skill of Star Palace in Lineage of Star? Lineage of Star will truly be in peace now. Sanctuary Alliance and all forces in Eternal Chaotic World had been watching after Lineage of Star and the three alliances. On the day when the three alliances finally fought with Lineage of Star. At first, almost everyone was certain that Lineage of Star would be destroyed and wiped out, without a chance to struggle. However, when the end result was announced, everyone found it unbelievable. The three alliances had been defeated. They were crushed. Star Extermination Alliance, who had attacked first, were defeated by Lineage of Star. There were almost 70 Almighties of them, but only less than 20 survived in the end. Supreme 10 Alliance did slightly better. Although quite a number of their Almighties were killed in the process of running away, it was much better compared to Star Extermination Alliance. The most tragic one would be Almighty's Alliance. Almighty's Alliance, that was made of more than 100 Almighties, should be the strongest among all three alliances. But in the end, Almighty's Alliance vanished into thin air. All experts had died and not one survived. Unbelievable. The result was entirely beyond one's expectation. Even the great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance didn't expect it would be so. Of course, the process of the war was gradually announced. Lineage of Star displayed their terrifying power and the true power of Universe Galaxy. Especially Jian Wuxuang's shocking stroke. One stroke destroyed the entire Almighty's Alliance? Is that a joke? Hundreds of Almighties were massacred by Sword Emperor's one stroke. That's too scary. Sword Emperor is so scary. He's simply a demon. Countless people were astonished. They yielded because of the terrifying stroke that Jian Wuxuang had revealed. Then Great Emperor came personally to wipe out everything. Just as Jian Wuxuang was in a desperate situation, a mysterious expert suddenly took action. With one glance the boundless darkness dispersed. One stroke, and it shattered Abysmal Saint Master's defense armor, which led to severe injury of Abysmal Saint Master. If it wasn't because Abysmal Saint Master wasn't qualified enough, he would be long dead in the person's hands. Then, Emperor Bai came personally and had an exchange of blows with the mysterious expert. Hundreds of millions of miles vanished. Such a terrifying scene struck fear into everyone. No one expected that the war that was originally suppressed, the war that had no suspense, suddenly had such a drastic change from nowhere. But regardless of the process, the result was confirmed. After the war, everyone understood that there was no one in Eternal Chaotic World that could pose a threat to Lineage of Star. The people who harbored deep-seated resentment and cast greedy eyes over secret skill of Star Palace. No matter how great their resentment or their greed was, they wouldn't dare to attack Lineage of Star. Just like the two remaining alliances, they immediately retreated to their old lair after the war, and didn't dare to attack Lineage of Star again. Such a scene reminded people of Master of Star Palace's massacre, when he was cornered by various forces many years ago. Back then, because of the Master of Star Palace's massacre, the forces in Eternal Chaotic World had been deterred. As long as the Master of Star Palace was alive, there were no forces who dared to attack Lineage of Star. But then, the war played an even greater deterrent force to Eternal Chaotic World. Not only were there more experts that had passed away, but also because of the terrifying stroke that Jian Wuxuang performed. Most importantly, even when a great emperor attacked, Abysmal Saint Master, who was a great emperor in third place, left with a severe injury. Who would have the guts to move Lineage of Star? Just as all forces were still astonished, the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance showed the changed on Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List. On Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List, there was no change for the top 15 great emperors. Everyone knew about the mysterious expert that had appeared in the war, Emperor 13. However, because Emperor 13 was too mysterious and his background was too unique, even though he was on par with Emperor Bai, or even more powerful than Emperor Bai, he wasn't listed on Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List. On the contrary, the ranking below the great emperors were drastic. There was no choice. There were too many experts that had died in the war in Universe Galaxy. There were many emperor gods from Almighty's Alliance that were killed by Jian Wuxuang. Hence, the change was drastic. Then, the ranking below Great Emperor on Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking List was as such. The 16th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list was still Underworld God. There was no doubt about it. Even though, regardless of if it were Jian Yi or Emperor God Tianling, they had displayed fighting power that could be compared to Underworld God favorably, they had never fought after all. On top of that, Underworld God was widely acknowledged previously. If there wasn't any battle achievement, it wouldn't change Underworld God's ranking. The 17th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list was Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1931. All parties surged. Jian Wushuang, Sword Emperor, the 17th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list. He was second to Underworld God. When it was announced, even Jian Wushuang was surprised. One should know that although he was powerful, it was a little forceful to say that he was second to Underworld God among Emperor Gods. Forget about the others. Jian Yi and Emperor God Tianling were already stronger than him. Plus, the boatman in black that Jian Wushuang had met on the way back from Emperor Sword Sect was also stronger than him. I'd like to see why the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance arranged themselves as such, Jian Wushuang muttered and continued to read. Sword Emperor once performed a shocking stroke and killed over 100 Almighties from Almighty's alliance. No one below Great Emperor rank could withstand the power of the one stroke. After the display of the shocking stroke, he was cornered by Abysmal Saint Master. At that crucial moment, he gave his all and launched a hit that could be compared favorably to a great emperor's. His trump cards were impressive. Plus, before he used any trump cards, he once fought against 3 peak emperor gods alone, and he had the upper hand. On top of that, he soul-controlled an expert with immeasurable skill, Jian Yi. With everything mentioned above, it is determined that Jian Wushuang's overall power could challenge an Underworld God's. The moment he launches his trump card, even Underworld God will have to move away. Hence his ranking on the 17th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list. On the brand new Heaven and Earth supreme ranking list, the reason why Jian Wushuang was on that ranking was listed clearly. Hence, no one had the guts to doubt him. Even, there were some who thought the higher-ups of Sanctuary Alliance had ranked Jian Wushuang too low. He should be above Underworld God. After all, even Underworld Gods had to avoid if they were to come across an Almighty's alliance that was made of over 100 Almighties. However, Jian Wushuang wielded his sword and killed everyone with one stroke. The terrifying stroke made everyone yield. Naturally, no one had any opinion about the ranking. It was Jian Wushuang himself who felt sheepish, because he had performed the terrifying stroke by putting the 3rd volume of Secret Skill of Star Palace to play altogether. The 3rd volume of Secret Skill of Star Palace wasn't easy to perform. After performing it once, it would require a long time until he could perform it the 2nd time. Putting the 3rd volume of Secret Skill of Star Palace aside, he reckoned his other trump cards wouldn't enable him to match Underworld God evenly. However, it wasn't false that Jian Yi was soul-controlled. Soul control was considered one of his skills as well. If he were to fight alongside Jian Yi, he might stand a chance to pose a threat to Underworld God. After all, Jian Yi was an expert from ancient times. After he revealed his terrifying fighting power in Universe Galaxy, the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance had already listed him on the 18th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list, just below Jian Wushuang. After Jian Yi, it was followed by Emperor God Tianling. That was normal. Those who partook in that way knew that Emperor God Tianling gave his all when he had fought with Jian Yi. But in the end, Jian Yi had the upper hand. It was obvious that Jian Yi was slightly stronger than Emperor God Tianling. The ranking among the top few peak Emperor Gods changed, and the ranking of the other peak Emperor Gods and ordinary Emperor Gods was even higher. However, Jian Wushuang merely went through it simply but didn't bother much. He broke 7 stars in the earlier battle, and the power of ancient tribe bloodline was exhausted. He would require time to slowly recover. King of Venomous Worms, for the rest of this time, it'll have to depend on you, Jian Wushuang smiled. I'll try my best, King of Venomous Worms replied. The current King of Venomous Worms found it hard to assist Jian Wushuang in fighting his enemies on the level of peak Emperor God. However, his recovery power had still played a major factor. His recovery power was Jian Wushuang's biggest reliance. In boundless darkness, in the void that had no light, there was a dark palace floating. In the depth of the dark palace on a lofty throne, there was a figure in a black robe that slowly appeared. The figure in the black robe had a pale face, and his aura was spiritless. It was Abysmal Saint Master. There was armor floating in front of Abysmal Saint Master. However, it was obvious that the armor was forcefully put together by shattered pieces. No way, forget about putting them back together. Even if I were to refine it entirely, the power of the Amor would be diminished greatly. ***. Abysmal Saint Master clenched his hand, and there was billowing hatred in his eyes. He had paid a great price to get the armor from ancient mystery land, but it had broken apart straight away. Emperor 13. ***MN Emperor 13. Just you wait. I can't do anything about you now. But it is only a matter of time until I peel your skin and break your bones. I'll let you know that letting me go is a great mistake. Not only you, but also Emperor Bai and Jian Wuxuang. One day, I will step on all of you. I definitely will. Abysmal Saint Master roared in madness. As his bellow spread, there were a few flames that soared into the air in darkness. In the huge estate that looked like a human paradise. On the calm river, a boat was drifting casually. On the boat, there was a lazy man in a purple robe fishing with his bamboo rod. At the same time, he was listening to the report of a beautiful woman in a purple robe behind him. Master, this is news from Lineage of Star. The beautiful woman in a purple robe said politely. They are defeated? The lazy man looked surprised. Abysmal took action himself, but didn't get to kill Jian Wuxuang. Abysmal is such rubbish. It wasn't because Abysmal Saint Master was not powerful. The crucial part is that a mysterious expert, Emperor 13, helped Jian Wuxuang, and he was too powerful. Abysmal Saint Master couldn't even take one stroke. Even when Emperor Bai attacked, he didn't manage to score before the mysterious expert. If I'm not mistaken, Emperor 13 should be an expert from ancient times. The beautiful woman in the purple robe said. An expert from ancient times? The lazy man was surprised. As it involves ancient times, it isn't something I can take care of. Report this to Demon King. He might know the origins of Emperor 13. Then, the lazy man continued to fish. The beautiful woman in the purple robe nodded and disappeared from the boat. In the darkest place in eternal chaotic world, Gugu, there was a large amount of black river water that covered the entire universe. The river was like the Netherland. The Black River water was like the water in the Netherland. This was the core of Acheron Palace. In the middle of the boundless netherworld, there was a floating island, and there was a pavilion towering on the island. In the depths, there was a pitch-black tower. The tower was huge, but there was only one level. Chapter 1932 The Number 1 Force in Sanctuary Alliance. In the tower, there was a huge bronze statue towering. The bronze statue was over 1,000 zhang tall, and he was wearing a bronze mask. He had a total of 8 hands, and the 8 hands were holding various weapons tightly. In front of the green bronze statue, it happened to be a figure in white robe knelt there politely. He had been kneeling there for 6 hours. Finally, there was a faint change in the bronze statue. On top of the statue, the only place the mask didn't cover was a pair of eyes, and they slowly looked down. I should say this before. If there isn't anything important, don't disturb me. A deep, old voice reverberated in the tower. Demon King, there is a mysterious expert in eternal chaotic world. He should be like you. He's also from ancient times. His name is Emperor 13. The person in a white robe was still kneeling politely. Oh, Emperor 13? He humphed. Is there a mirror image of how he fought? There is. The white-robed person waved, and immediately there was a mirror image that appeared in the tower. In the mirror image, Emperor 13 attacked and defeated Abysmal Saint Master with ease. Then, there was a scene when Emperor Bai fought. When he watched the scenes in the mirror image, the pair of eyes on the top of the bronze statue dilated in shock. It's him? An old voice asked with a tinge of shock. Demon King knew this person? The person in white robe couldn't help but ask. Yeah, of course I do. Emperor 13? Haha, it's a great name. But that's not right. It should be his name before he got famous, or a name that he gave himself when he wandered outside. The ancient voice resounded smilingly. This person is a big figure. A shocking figure. There were countless experts that partook in the life-destroying war back then. There were many that possessed great skills. Among the countless experts that partook in the war, this person's power could be in the top 5. What? The person who was kneeling down suddenly lifted her head and revealed an enchanting lattice appearance. Then there was shock in her beautiful eyes. Top 5? In the ancient times war, his power could be in the top 5? If so, wouldn't he be stronger than you? Of course he was stronger than I am. During the war back then, I had to avoid him when I saw him. Otherwise my life would be threatened. However, that was back then. I am different now. The power in this universe is restricted greatly. My power couldn't be played, and it would be the same for him. Even if I were to fight against him, I would not be afraid. The bronze statue's voice sounded confident. The beautiful woman in the white robe then let out a breath of relief. As he is awake, the others should wake up soon. Haha, it has been so many years and it is finally here. Haha, I am quite excited. I wish that it could be ended completely this time. Go and get ready. Ha ha ha. The bronze statue's hysterical laughter reverberated in the entire tower. The beautiful woman in the white robe bowed politely and walked out of the tower. In the darkness, all forces surged, but Lineage of Star was at peace. Sanctuary Alliance came forth to mediate. The war between Lineage of Star and the two alliances couldn't continue. The rest of the time, Lineage of Star naturally needed to rebuild Star Land. In the blink of an eye, 300 years had passed. In the 300 years, Lineage of Star had not only reconquered Star Land, their power had also continued to expand. They had already covered a few lands, and they had the power to influence in Purple Moon Sanctuary. As within Sanctuary Alliance, although it had only been 300 years, Lineage of Star had already advanced and leaped to become a major force in Sanctuary Alliance. There was no doubt that no other force in Sanctuary Alliance could compare to the power that Lineage of Star possessed favorably. Lineage of Star had more say in Sanctuary Alliance than before too. Even the great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance had scruples with Lineage of Star. Firstly, they had received news that Jian Wuxia had already obtained the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill from Emperor Bai. It was only a matter of time until he would break through and become an almighty. Then, he would be on par with them, or even be above them. Secondly, they also knew that there was a terrifying super expert backing Jian Wuxia, who could compare to Emperor Bai favorably, Emperor 13. Because of these two reasons, the great emperors of course had to take it easy. As long as Lineage of Star was not behaving wildly, they had to turn a blind eye and not bother with them. The tide rises, the boat floats. Lineage of Star naturally changed with an upward trend as well. In a lofty hall, the higher-ups of Lineage of Star gathered there to have a discussion. The one leading was of course Jian Wuxia, followed by the 3 hall masters and deacon elders who were on real god level. As for guest elders, they were only guests. They wouldn't be involved with Lineage of Star's affairs on a normal basis. Palace Master, we have just received news that a disciple of Lineage of Star had a brush with a disciple of Real Martial Art Divine Church when he was wandering in Dragonfire Land on East Royal Sanctuary. Both parties fought. At first, the disciple of Lineage of Star had the upper hand. In the end, a real god from Real Martial Art Divine Church took action personally and injured our disciple badly. Hall Master Yuan said calmly. Hearing what Hall Master Yuan had said, the surrounding deacon elders looked at Hall Master Yuan with a strange look. Fighting between disciples and suffering some losses were minor matters. Minor matters that not worth mentioning. In a normal situation, Hall Master Yuan could command any one of the deacon elders to take care of it. However, at the higher-ups meeting, Hall Master Yuan had brought up something so petty and reported to Jian Wuxia. What was he trying to do? Just as the deacon elders were extremely confused, Jian Wuxia on the throne suddenly slammed the table and stood up. There was soaring anger in his eyes. Real Martial Art Divine Church? Humph, the master of Real Martial Art Divine Church has already died, and they are behaving so arrogantly. How dare they bully our disciples in lineage of star? They have guts. He Xiao, Jian Wushuang overlooked. Master. He Xiao, who was already a deacon elder in lineage of star, immediately stood up. Although Real Martial Arts Divine Church was in East Royal Sanctuary, Dragon Fire Land isn't their territory. They merely have a few branches there. You bring 4 Dao soldiers and make a trip there. Wipe out the 2 branches of Real Martial Arts Divine Church in Dragon Fire Land. I will let Emperor God Jiuyin hide in the dark. If the Almighties from Real Martial Arts Divine Church dare to make an appearance, eliminate them all at once. Chapter 1933 The Promise. Jian Wushuang was raging with anger. Yes. He Xian immediately took his order. The deacon elders in the hall exchanged a look, and they were shocked. It was merely fought among the disciples, and their disciples had suffered a minor loss. It was a trivial matter. But in the end, Jian Wushuang ordered He Xian to bring 4 Dao soldiers and wipe out the 2 branches of Real Martial Art Divine Church. It was obvious that he had made a mountain out of a molehill. However, when they saw the cold expressions of the 3 hall masters, they immediately understood. It was obvious that Jian Wushuang and the other 3 hall masters had intentionally made a mountain out of a molehill. They also understood the reason behind it. Real Martial Art Divine Church was one of the 5 forces in Star Extermination Alliance. They had nearly cornered Lineage of Star to death. Even though because of Sanctuary Alliance, Lineage of Star had agreed to stop meddling with the 2 alliances, the hatred was still there. Lineage of Star definitely had the upper hand. Even though he couldn't start a war, he had seized the chance to take revenge. For instance, it was just a trivial matter, but it was enough to become Lineage of Star's excuse. They wanted to look for an opportunity to deal with Real Martial Art Divine Church. They weren't afraid that Real Martial Art Divine Church would take revenge either. They even wished for Real Martial Art Divine Church to counterattack. The moment Real Martial Art Divine Church counterattacked, or they had the guts to take revenge, Lineage of Star had no scruples and would pound at them. By then, even Sanctuary Alliance couldn't say much. As for what happened next, He Xiao rushed to Dragonfire Land in East Royal Sanctuary and wiped out the 2 branches of Real Martial Art Divine Church with thunderous measures. After that, He Xian intentionally stayed back in Dragonfire Land for a while as Jian Wushuang instructed. He waited for Real Martial Art Divine Church to find trouble in him. However, Real Martial Art Divine Church knew Lineage of Star's goal. Not only didn't they counterattack, they also apologized to Lineage of Star. Then it ended. The forces in Sanctuary Alliance found out about it inside. Everyone could tell that Lineage of Star was making a mountain out of a molehill. They had intentionally picked on them. Plus, Lineage of Star had even wiped out the 2 branches of Real Martial Art Divine Church and killed many disciples of Real Martial Art Divine Church. But in the end, it was the master of Real Martial Art Divine Church who apologized. They are not as powerful. It was merely a fight among the juniors. Isn't Lineage of Star behaving too barbarically? Barbaric? Are you dumb? Lineage of Star isn't dumb, but that derived from resentment. To your enemy, who is willing to let the opportunity slip. I think Lineage of Star isn't overboard. If I were him, I'd definitely do the same. Yeah, Lineage of Star is only barbaric to the forces from the 2 alliances. To forces and experts that share no resentment, they are rather peaceful. The Real Martial Art Divine Church asked for it as well. The forces from the 2 alliances, besides Abysmal Palace that has a great emperor attending garrison duty, which other forces aren't worried about Lineage of Star? Real Martial Art Divine Church bullied the junior by sending a real god expert to attack the universe god disciple of Lineage of Star personally. Isn't this courting death? All of the forces in Sanctuary Alliance was laughing about it. In the end, no one thought Lineage of Star was behaving ridiculously, but on the contrary, they found it right and proper. As for the barbaric stories of Lineage of Star, it was obviously unbelievable. After all, Lineage of Star was only barbaric towards the other enemies. Once they had found an opportunity or excuse, they would pound without hesitation. To the other forces and sects, they were peaceful. Both parties would sit down and talk about it if it were a trivial matter. In the blink of an eye, 200 years had passed. Lineage of Star had finally settled down. The forces that formed the two alliances back then had seen what had happened to the real martial art Divine Church, and they had learned their lesson. They held scruples with Lineage of Star. When they had come across any expert or disciple from Lineage of Star, they'd hide far away. If they were to cross paths, they'd hold back as much as they could and not let Lineage of Star stand any chance to take revenge. Then, Jian Wushuang had already left Lineage of Star and arrived at an ordinary Holy Kingdom. The name of the Holy Kingdom was Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart. The ancient silver spaceship shuttled through the dark void. In no time, there was a floating land. There's the old lair of Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. The king of Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart was a Sir God expert that was powerful. Of course, a Sir God was nothing before Jian Wushuang. The purpose of Jian Wushuang's trip was to kill him. In the dim secret room, there was a scrawny elder in black. He was cultivating. He was King Demon Heart. He was also the king of Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart. Over the years he had ruled the surrounding holy kingdoms, and he had a powerful background. Hence, he could march over eternal chaotic world unhindered. There was almost no one who dared to provoke him. He could be said to be a very relaxed and powerful figure. In his name, there was the word demon. His disposition was naturally very vicious. Legends said that the surrounding dozens of holy kingdoms would send a bunch of beautiful ladies to his old lair, and they were all virgins. At least thousands of people, and at most tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of people. But there was no one who walked out from his old lair. One day, Virum, there was a sudden shake of prohibition that covered the secret room. King Demon Heart, who was sitting there with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. Who is it? King Demon Heart's voice reverberated in the secret room. Swoosh. There was a figure that appeared in front of him from nowhere. Real God. King Demon Heart was surprised, and he already knew who the incomer was. I see. Sword Emperor came personally. Greetings. King Demon Heart bowed slightly at Jian Wushuang. Then he smiled and said, Sword Emperor came today. I wonder what you have in mind. Whatever I can do, I'll do it for you. I came here today for one person, and also for a promise back then. Jian Wushuang said coldly. A person? Promise. King Demon Heart was confused. Real God Wu Bei. I wonder, does King Demon Heart remember him? Jian Wushuang said. Wu Bei. King Demon Heart's face instantly changed, and he could instantly guess the purpose of Jian Wushuang's visit. The sixth step of inverse cultivation skill was obtained from real God Wu Bei. Back then, I promised him that I would kill you on his behalf when I had the power to. Today, I came to carry out my promise. Jian Wushuang's eyes were glistening as he raised his right hand. Sword Emperor, I am Great Emperor Zizus Man. Great Emperor Zisu owes me a favor, King Demon Heart said. Oh yeah. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold, but there was no pause in his actions. He knew about King Demon Heart's background. As he dared to attack that day, he naturally had no scruples. Chapter 1934 Spacetime Gap. King Demon Heart saw that there was no sign of stopping in Jian Wushuang action, and he panicked. He immediately took out a token. Pack. King Demon Heart immediately smashed the token and roared. Great Emperor Zisu, save me. Jian Wushuang wants to kill me. The token belonged to Great Emperor Zisu. Theoretically, when a token was smashed, Great Emperor Zizus' consciousness incarnation should descend. Although it was just a consciousness incarnation, Jian Wushuang had to show respect when a great emperor made an appearance. At least, that was what King Demon Heart thought. However, he had never expected that there would be no movement at all after the token was smashed. There were no changes in the entire secret room. Great Emperor Zizus' consciousness incarnation didn't come? How is it possible? Why didn't Great Emperor Zizus' consciousness incarnation descend? Could Great Emperor be cultivating in seclusion? Impossible, impossible. King Demon Heart felt hopeless then. If Great Emperor Zizus' consciousness incarnation were to be second, he might have had a string of hope. However, without Great Emperor Zizus' consciousness incarnation, Jian Wushuang naturally wouldn't delay further. Jian Wushuang's palm rose, and there was a resplendent golden light that appeared from nowhere. The golden light was the Hongjun golden sword. Die! Jian Wushuang bellowed, and the resplendent golden light burst out. No! King Demon Heart's face changed. He knew Jian Wushuang was powerful, and he also knew the terrifying Hongyun golden sword. Although it was only one Hongjun golden sword, it would still be like slaughtering a chicken to kill him. Sword Emperor, don't kill me. I was only following orders to scheme against real God Wu Bei back then. Real God Wu Bei's death wasn't my intention. It was Great Emperor Ziza's. Great Emperor Zisu wanted me to scheme against real God Wu Bei. King Demon Heart roared from the bottom of his heart. However, Jian Wushuang didn't bother about his roaring. The resplendent golden light didn't pause and spread at a terrifying speed, and pierced King Demon Heart's skull. Before King Demon Heart died, his eyes were wide open, and there was unwillingness on his face. Jian Wushuang stood on the spot and waved. Then the Hongjun golden sword flew back next to him, and he put it in Qian Kuan ring. Looking at King Demon Heart's cold, dead body, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. King Demon Heart was really Great Emperor Ziza's man. Rumor had it that Great Emperor Zisu did owe King Demon Heart a favor. However, when King Demon Heart had asked him for help earlier, he hadn't cared, and he hadn't bothered descending in consciousness incarnation either. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Great Emperor Zisu, a super expert on the 5th place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list. Previously, Jian Wushuang had had scruples. Hence, he had never once attacked King Demon Heart. But then, Lineage of Star was at peace, and he had many trump cards on hand. On top of that, Emperor 13 had made an appearance to save him previously. Hence, great emperors in eternal chaotic world had scruples. As a result, Jian Wushuang had no scruples to attack King Demon Heart. Before he had come, Jian Wushuang had already made preparations to deal with Great Emperor Zisu. Once Great Emperor Zisu appeared in consciousness incarnation, Jian Wushuang would continue to kill King Demon Heart. He believed that Great Emperor wouldn't fall out with him, or even fight with him, because of the King Demon Heart. But he had never expected that Great Emperor Zisu wouldn't even reveal himself. He didn't even descend in consciousness incarnation, but had let him kill King Demon Heart. What is Great Emperor Zisu thinking? Jian Wushuang was confused. Besides, Jian Wushuang was surprised at whatever King Demon Heart had said earlier. The one who had schemed against real God Wu Bei back then wasn't King Demon Heart, but Great Emperor Zisu? Was it a joke? A great emperor? Why would he scheme against real God Wu Bei out of nowhere? Regardless, I've done whatever I promised real God Wu Bei. I already killed King Demon Heart. As for if it involved Great Emperor Zisu, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Forget about the fact that it was only King Demon Heart's comment alone. It might not be real. Even if it was real, I couldn't do anything about a great emperor. Jian Wushuang shook his head, but didn't think further. He then turned to leave. However, he didn't know that at that very moment, on the boat that was drifting on the river at the estate that was like human paradise, the lazy man who was fishing on the boat, Great Emperor Zisu, was smiling. Jian Wushuang came personally to kill Demon Heart? It seems like it is because of real God Wu Bei. It's just Demon Heart. So what if you kill him? I will let you off the hook this time. I hope it ends here. The lazy man smiled and continued to fish. Just as Jian Wushuang was on the way to Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart to kill King Demon Heart. In Ancient Mystery Land, the Ancient Mystery Land that originally opened once every 5 million years, and opens for 10,000 years each time. It still wasn't closing after it had reached the 10,000-year limit. As all the experts in Eternal Chaotic World were surprised, they were also filled with excitement. One should know that Ancient Mystery Land contained many opportunities. After all these years, there had been many experts that had gone into Ancient Mystery Land to look for an opportunity again. Emperor God Xia Xian was only an emperor god on the bottom rank among all emperor gods in Eternal Chaotic World. His power was ordinary, and he hadn't had much luck all this while. Ever since Ancient Mystery Land opened, he had been wandering in Ancient Mystery Land. Previously, when he had wandered for the given limit of 10,000 years, He hadn't received any good opportunity. But then, when he entered ancient mystery land to wander, he had finally found a strange land after a few thousand years. I never expected that there would be a space-time gap hidden under the ruin. This is so secretive. Emperor God Xiazin's eyes were shimmering when he saw the space-time gap before him. The space-time gap gave him a feeling that it was like a space-time tunnel. He had no idea where the other side of the gap was. It might be a dangerous land, but it might also be an opportunity. He wasn't confident. Wealth comes from danger. Let's bet. Emperor God Xiaxian clenched his teeth. He had finally made up his mind after being in deep thought for very long. He moved and immersed himself in the space-time gap. He disappeared very quickly. When he appeared again, Virum, Emperor God Xiaxian appeared in an entirely different universe. Looking at the situation, he was still on an ancient battlefield. Emperor God Xiaxian wouldn't recognize the ancient aura wrongly. However, the ancient battlefield was obviously different from the ancient battlefield in ancient mystery land. The spiritual influence of heaven and earth here is so abundant. It's abundant. The intensity of it might be at least 10 times stronger than 10 cultivation sanctuaries. How could there be a place so filled with spiritual influence of heaven and earth? Where is this place? Is it still an ancient mystery land? Emperor God Xiaxian was confused. However, he knew that the place that he was at was definitely extremely different from ancient mystery land. Emperor God Xiaxian immediately started probing the surroundings. However, if he could put his soul power over everything around him, he would realize that he had come to another ancient battlefield. The ancient battlefield was much bigger and more spacious than the ancient battlefield in ancient mystery land. Plus, the battlefield was engulfed in a huge space-time storm. At the core of the battlefield, there was a huge boundless skull that would shock everyone. At the core of the skull, there was a huge world. That huge world was Greenfire World. Chapter 1935 Hitch a Ride. Eternal chaotic world was boundless. However, 99% of it was boundless dark void. In one of the dark voids, an ancient silver spaceship was traveling forward slowly. There was a total of 4 people on the spaceship. The 4 people were Jian Wushuang, Jianyi, maidservant Qiuyu, and an elderly in green. The elderly in green was King of Venomous Worms. Although King of Venomous Worms was a plenilin living in the ancient god body, he could also take the form of a human when his power reached a certain level. They were returning from Holy Kingdom of Demon Heart. As they were rushing their journey in the dark void, boredom was inevitable. King of Venomous Worms took form of a human, and he could drink and play chess with Jian Wushuang. Then he wouldn't feel as lonely. King of Venomous Worms, when will my power of 7 stars recover? Jian Wushuang asked. In a long while. Back then, you only broke 6 stars. I went all out and it took 7,000 years until you fully recovered. Now that it's the power of 7 stars, even with my assistance, it will require a long time. Of course, if you were to return to your hometown, with the abundant spiritual influence of heaven and earth, the recovery speed will increase tremendously, King of Venomous Worms said. Go back to my hometown? Jian Wushuang was happy at the thought of it. Although everything in Lineage of Star has settled down, the dark sides in eternal chaotic world still aren't peaceful. However, with great emperors as higher-ups, I can't help much either. I'll go back after a while. To Jian Wushuang, Greenfire World was not only his hometown, but also a place that contained great opportunities. The attraction of the ancient battlefield in Greenfire World was much greater than ancient mystery land. Back when he wandered for 6,000 years in ancient battlefield, he had reaped great harvest. Then, as everything settled down and he had received the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill, he really wanted to return to his hometown to cultivate, so that he could break through and become an almighty sooner. I wonder if Emperor 13 is still on the battlefield, Jian Wushuang muttered. About the mysterious ancient expert, Emperor 13. He had asked Jian before if he had heard of the name, but Jian didn't know. Hence, even then, Jian Wushuang had no idea about Emperor 13 at all. He only knew that he was from ancient times and he was powerful. Just as Jian Wushuang was casually chatting with Jian and King of Venomous Worms, In the void in front of the ancient silver spaceship, there were a dozen figures shuttling in the dark void. These people weren't in a spaceship, but merely flying with their power. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The dozen figures stopped simultaneously. The blue-haired lady, who seemed to be the leader, took out a star map. We should be here in this location. There is still a great distance to the territory of Holy Kingdom of South Plume. With our traveling speed, we need at least another 100 years until we get there, the blue-haired lady said. 100 years? The surrounding people looked cold. 100 years was nothing normally, but forget about 100 years. Even dozens of years, or a few years, would be torturous to them. Their lives would be threatened anytime. Just then, at the far end, there was an ancient silver spaceship plunging over. That is, the blue-haired lady was thrilled at the sight. Such a fast-traveling spaceship, much faster than the one we were in before. It definitely must be a peak expert who could drive such spaceship. The blue-haired lady squinted her eyes and then she turned to order. Wait for me here. Then, the blue-haired lady flew towards the silver spaceship. On the silver spaceship, Jian Wushuang and the others had already noticed the blue-haired lady and her troops. When they saw the blue-haired lady fly over, Jian Wushuang stopped the spaceship as well. Qiuyu, head out and take a look, Jian Wushuang commanded. Yes. Qiuyu nodded and immediately walked out of the cabin. What's the matter? Qiuyu floated in the void and looked in the direction of the blue-haired lady. May I know if the spaceship is flying towards Holy Kingdom of South Plume? The blue-haired lady asked humbly. Holy Kingdom of South Plume? Yeah, we would pass by Holy Kingdom of South Plume, Qiuyu answered. That's great. The blue-haired lady was happy and she immediately offered. I wonder if we could hitch a ride. I'm willing to pay a high price. High price? There was suddenly a cold voice. Jian Wushuang had already walked out from the cabin as well. He looked at the blue-haired lady with a smile. At the same time, he also noticed the dozen people in the void. He smiled. How much are you willing to pay? The blue-haired lady looked at Jian Wushuang. She could feel the real god aura from Jian Wushuang, but she couldn't sense if it was void real god or eternal real god, or even chaotic real god. She hesitated for a while, and she waved to take out a Qian Kung ring. Please take a look. Jian Wushuang swept his soul power over the Qian Kuan ring, and he was surprised. There were many resources and treasures in the Qian Kuan ring. He reckoned that it would cost up to 1,000 doctrine gems in total. To a real god, it was definitely not a small sum. She was merely hitching a ride, but the blue-haired lady took out such great sum that it shocked Jian Wushuang. The resources and treasure in the Qian Kuan ring is just a deposit. If you were to send us into the territory of Holy Kingdom of South Plume safely, I would thank you with great prices, the blue-haired lady said again. Oh, it seems that you have quite a bit of treasure on hand. Aren't you worried that I would have evil thoughts at the sight of the riches and kill you straightway? Then, the Qian Kuan ring and every treasure on you would be mine. Jian Wushuang smiled. You might not know. All my treasures are in the Qian Kuan ring. As for the remaining price, I could only realize them when we reach Holy Kingdom of South Plume safely. If you kill me now, you will not get the greater price at the end, the blue-haired lady said. You're right. If so, come on board. Jian Wushuang waved. Thank you. The blue-haired lady was happy. She immediately let the dozen figures that were waiting far away rush over. Very soon, these people entered the cabin of the spaceship. Mister, look at these people. They seem to be on the run. We might have trouble if we were to take them, Qiuyu said. I know. Jian Wushuang nodded. He could tell long ago. If they weren't on the run and in a desperate situation, why would the blue-haired lady, who was only a real god, offer and promise such a great deal to hide them to escort? I reckon that they saw that my spaceship's travel speed was extremely fast and knew that we are powerful. Hence, they came to look for us. Jian Wushuang smiled. We have no need to do anything. Let them hitch a ride, and we can earn some doctrine gems. Jianyi and King of Venomous Worms smiled. Chapter 1936 The Luo Royal Family. To Jian Wushuang and the others, they really would pass by Holy Kingdom of South Plume. Hence, letting them hitch a ride was as easy as lifting their hands. As for the so-called trouble, it could bring them some fun and joy on their way. So why not? Everyone, although I agreed to let you hitch a ride, you have to clarify the trouble that you are in to us. Jian Wushuang smiled. The blue-haired lady and the surrounding few people exchanged a look and nodded faintly. Well, the blue-haired lady immediately started telling them the ins and outs. Jian Wushuang was listening too. Very quickly, he understood the entire story. At the same time, he also found out the identity of the people in front of him. The dozen people had great backgrounds. They were the royal disciples from Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo, a holy kingdom from the surrounding. Yes, royal family. Their tribe master was also the monarch of Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. Originally, they were supremes in Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. They were a definite symbol of power. However, not too long ago, Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo had gone through a drastic change. There was a major force, Soul-Snatching Palace, that had attacked the royal family. Soul-Snatching Palace was originally not as powerful as the royal family. No one knew where they had gotten the assistance. There were more than 1,000 royal disciples that had escaped who were all outstanding geniuses. However, as Soul-Snatching Palace continued to chase after them, the number of royal disciples dwindled to a dozen after a few fights. Among the dozen people, the strongest was the blue-haired lady Luofeng, but she was only a void real god. As for the others, they were only universe gods. They intended to flee to Holy Kingdom of South Flume then. Holy Kingdom of South Flume and Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo allied through marriages over generations. The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Flume was also the monarch of Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo's best friends. He naturally would take them with him. Of course, only on the prerequisite that they could reach Holy Kingdom of South Flume alive. Soul-Snatching Palace is determined to exterminate we Luo family. Although it isn't too far away, we might be attacked by them. You have to be prepared, Luofeng said. Soul-Snatching Palace? Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded, but he obviously didn't care much. Luofeng and a purple-haired youth by her side saw the sight, and their eyes fixed on him. Soul-Snatching Palace is impressive. You'd better not be careless. The purple-haired youth couldn't help but add. Is it? Jian Wushuang didn't say much, but he looked at the purple-haired youth in shock. He could tell that the purple-haired youth wasn't very old, but his gaze was deep. Plus, Jian Wushuang could see a hidden hatred in the depth of his eyes. The hatred should be derived from the extermination of Luo family. Young man, what's your name? Jian Wushuang looked at the purple-haired youth. Luo Tianhong. The purple-haired youth replied coldly. That's a good name. Don't worry. I'll dismiss Soul-Snatching Palace for you. Jian Wushuang smiled. The purple-haired youth Luo Tianhong didn't say much after that. For the remaining time, the ancient silver spaceship continued forward. In the cabin, Jian Wushuang and King of Venomous Worms were playing chess while Jianyi and Qiuyu watched in respect. As for the disciples from Luo royal family, they were gathered there too, but they didn't talk to Jian Wushuang and the others much. Brother Tianhong, do you think we can reach Holy Kingdom of South Plume alive? A maiden in green asked timidly. The other disciples from Luo royal family couldn't help but look at the purple-haired youth Luo Tianhong. Although the purple-haired youth wasn't the oldest among the disciples, his power and talent were the strongest. Plus, he had been through the most. Hence, he was the most mature one. The disciples from Luo royal family had always viewed Luo Tianhong as their leader. Don't worry, we will definitely survive. Luo Tianhong comforted the disciples at his side and he smiled. I believe in Brother Tianhong. The timid maiden nodded faintly. After comforting the disciples, Luo Tianhong came next to the blue-haired lady Luofeng. Tianhong, what do you think of these few people? Luofeng pointed at Jian Wushuang and the others who were around the chess set. Although I can't see through them, I can feel that they should be quite powerful, Luo Tianhong replied. How is it so? Luofeng asked. Firstly, the spaceship is unusual. They could drive such a spaceship, and it shows their power. Plus, they know that Soul-Snatching Palace is powerful and could wipe out Luo royal family directly, but they didn't seem to care much about Soul-Snatching Palace in their speech. I believe the experts who could drive such a spaceship definitely wouldn't be idiots that were blind. Hence, they definitely have reliance, Luo Tianhong analyzed. I thought so too, Luo Feng smiled. Actually, regardless of if these people are capable, we are in a desperate situation. We could only bet on this, and pray that we bet on the right one. Luo Tianhong nodded heavily. They were really cornered in a desperate situation. There were originally 1,000 disciples, but they were chased after by soul-snatching palace. There were only a dozen of them left out of the 1,000 royal disciples. Luo Feng was the only real god expert that was escorting them thought their journey. With the remaining fighting power, they would definitely die if they were to come across soul-snatching palace. Hence, they had no other ways. Helplessly, when they saw that Jian Wushuang and the others were on the spaceship, they decided to try their luck. As for the result, it was up to their destiny. On the other side, Jian Wushuang was playing chess with King of Venomous Worms. However, they were also chatting casually while playing chess. Of course, they had already sealed off the surrounding spacetime. Hence, the Luo royal disciples wouldn't hear whatever they said. Jian Wushuang, I probed earlier. Among these people, there were some who had a special mark left on them. If not mistaken, it should be marked by soul-snatching palace. King of Venomous Worms smiled. I know. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. The master of the mark shouldn't be powerful, but should only be a real god. Jian Wushuang naturally could see the mark easily. Do you need me to remove the mark? King of Venomous Worms asked. There's no need to. Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled. There's finally some fun. How could we just let it slip? Plus, the mark is unusual. I'd like to verify who left the mark. Let's go with the flow. Chapter 1937 Recommendation. In the blink of an eye, a year flew past. In the past 1 year, Jian Wushuang and the troop hadn't come across any hindrance, and the people from Soul-Snatching Palace hadn't barged in either. In the dark void, the ancient silver spaceship continued to travel forward. On the deck of the silver spaceship, a purple-haired youth wielded a saber. Quang! 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 There were saber lights that swung out from his hand continuously. The saber lights were extremely brilliant, and they brought along boundless hatred. Every single stroke contained extreme hatred. Die! 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 The purple-haired youth had billowing murderous intention. The saber skills that he performed were definitely massacre-worthy. It brought about billowing hatred that would stop at nothing. Just as he was performing a saber skill, the entire void was engulfed in utter murderous intention and hatred. His saber skills were ferocious. The realm was shocking. The young man named Luo Tianhong is pretty good. In the cabin, King of Venomous Worms commented casually. He's not bad. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly as well. For the past 1 year, although he hadn't spoken much with Luo Tianhong, he had seen the hard work that he had put in for the past 1 year. Different to the other disciples of Luo royal family, Luo Tianhong took painstaking efforts to cultivate and constantly developed his saber skills and improve his power. At any time, he would be thinking about improving his power and taking revenge, using boundless hatred as motivation, just like when I was young, Jian Wushuang muttered. Plus, what shocked Jian Wushuang was that not only was Luo Tianhong hardworking, he was also extremely talented. Not only was his talent displayed with saber skills, it was also shown in his comprehension level. A universe god in the third heaven, and he should have just passed the third god's test not too long ago. But he is already at the beginner level of massacre doctrine, and his comprehension is ridiculously high. He has already reached the second level of Doctrine Palace. Jian Wushuang was surprised. The second level of Doctrine Palace. Even among the top 10 in Universe God ranking list, there were very few who achieved that. Luo Tianhong's talent was much stronger than many geniuses that Jian Wushuang had met before. Jian Wushuang, even though his lineal disciple, Xian, was slightly weaker than him in terms of comprehension. It's a pity that Luo Tianhong isn't good at swords. Otherwise, maybe you could take him in as a disciple. Jianyi looked at Jian Wushuang. Disciple? Jian Wushuang shook his head. If it wasn't necessary, or he didn't truly favor one, he wouldn't take on a disciple easily. Although Luo Tianhong was talented, and he might even be more talented than He Xiu, Jian Wushuang wouldn't take him as his disciples, even if he was good at swords. Although I wouldn't take him on as my disciple, I could recommend him to a good master. Jian Wushuang flashed a strange smile. Then he took out a communication token. Duan Lingfeng, long time no see. How have you been? Oh, the infamous Sword Emperor? What reminds you of me? Duan Lingfeng replied very soon, and he made fun in his reply. Haha be asterisk starred. Jian Wushuang smiled. Duan Lingfeng was Jian Wushuang's best friend, a brother that was hard to come by. Back in real God Wu Bai's cave dwelling, Duan Lingfeng and he had gone through trials and tribulations together. Plus, their powers were similar then, and they were known as the top experts. The two of them were best friends, also an opponent that was hard to come by. They had been competing with one another all this while. However, ever since Jian Wushuang had broken through and become a real god, his power had instantly increased tremendously because of the advantage of being an inverse cultivator. Naturally, Duan Lingfeng was left far behind him. Then Jian Wushuang was already at the top of eternal chaotic world. The 17th place on Heaven and Earth Supreme Ranking list, right below the great emperors and underworld god. Such power wasn't one that Duan Lingfeng could compare to favorably. After all, Duan Lingfeng had yet to break through and become an almighty. However, although he didn't become an almighty, Duan Lingdang had already broken through to chaotic real god level. With his gifted talent and saber skills, he was listed as the first place in real god ranking list, and there was no other arguable match. That itself was impressive. Duan Lingfeng, I found you a great disciple. Would you like to come and see? Jian Wushuang asked. Disciple? Duan Lingfeng shook his head directly. My goal now is to break through soon and become an almighty, to stand side by side with you. I am not in the mood to take in any disciple. Don't refuse so soon. Come here and take a look at him. Maybe he's suitable for you. Jian Wushuang smiled. All right. Where are you now? Oh, come over now, Duan Lingfeng said. I'll arrive at Holy Kingdom of South Plume soon. Hurry up, Jian Wushuang replied. Don't worry. I'll take a space-time wormhole. I'll arrive in 10 years' time, Duan Lingfeng said. After he talked to Duan Lingfeng, Jian Wushuang lifted the corners of his lips and revealed an interesting smile. The purple-haired youth, Luo Tianhong, was extremely talented from Jian Wushuang's point of view. Plus, he was good at saber skills, and his talent with massacre doctrine was unbelievably high. As for Duan Lingfeng, he happened to be good at saber, and had comprehended massacre doctrine as well. In addition to Luo Tianhong's hardworking character and his temperament, Jian Wushuang believed that Duan Lingfeng should appreciate him too. If he were to miss the disciple, it might be difficult to find such outstanding disciple in the future. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang suddenly moved, and he immediately revealed a playful mocking smile. They're finally here? Right before the spaceship that Jian Wushuang and his troops were in, there were dozens of figures standing there in silence. The dozens of figures were all in black robes, and their aura were fierce. There were more than 10 real gods. The remaining members of Luo royal family is in front? A red-headed elderly squinted his eyes and he looked. Hee, these rats are good at running. But no matter how they run, it'll be useless. There's a unique mark that I left on their bodies which they don't know about. From today onwards, Luo royal family will finally be wiped out. Next to the red-headed elder, there were a few figures in black ferocious masks. The few of them with masks had a cold aura, and there were faint massacre auras spreading from their bodies. Hearing what the red-headed elder said, the leader of the masked men said coldly, Don't be too confident. Ever since the remaining members of Luo royal members fled, we have been after them for tens of years, and attacked them multiple times, but we couldn't wipe them out. I hope there won't be anyone who escapes this time. Don't worry. Previously there were too many of them. The moment the massacre happens, they will flee in all directions. It is inevitable to have a few escape. However, it is different this time. Luo royal family only has a dozen of them left. There is definitely no possibility of escaping, the red-headed elder insisted. Save the bullshit and attack, the masked man said in a deep voice. Chapter 1938 The Kruer Formation. On the silver spaceship, saber lights continued to sweep across. Revenge, I want to take revenge. Power, I am not powerful enough. The purple-haired youth Luo Tianhong had billowing hatred in his eyes. Just then, a crowd of figures in black robes swarmed over. Luo Tianhong immediately noticed, and his eyes dilated in shock. Then, he immediately went into the cabin. Soul-snatching palace's men are here. Luo Tianhong's voice was cold. The disciples of Luo royal family and Luo Feng immediately stood up. Their faces grew extremely solemn, and there was boundless hatred shimmering in their eyes. Everyone. Luo Feng turned to look at Jian Wushuang and the others with a pleading gaze. Don't worry, I will protect all of you. Jian Wushuang smiled. Master, why don't I take action and dismiss them? Jianyi said. It's okay. Jian Wushuang shook his head. I'd like to verify something. Then, Jian Wushuang waved and a brawny figure in bronze armor appeared before everyone. The brawny figure was naturally a Dao soldier. Jian Wushuang had many Dao soldiers on hand. Although most of them were left in lineage of Star, he kept a few with him just in case he needed them. For instance, he wanted to send the Dao soldier into action then. The ancient silver spaceship had already stopped, and among the dozen men in black outside the spaceship, their eyes grew solemn when they saw the spaceship. This spaceship seems unusual. One is definitely an expert to be able to drive such a spaceship. The masked man who was the leader pressed down his voice. Could it be the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume? Humph. So what if he is the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume? We can wipe out Luo royal family. So why are we afraid of Holy Kingdom of South Plume? The red-headed elder smirked in disdain. Then, from the ancient spaceship, there was a brawny figure in bronze armor that suddenly burst out. The Dao soldier in bronze armor didn't speak, but straight away attacked the experts from Soul-Snatching Palace. D***eminent. How dare he? The people from Soul-Snatching Palace instantly raged, and the red-headed elder even let out an angry bellow. Destroy it! Hong! 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 A few fierce auras exploded simultaneously. There was a total of 4 figures, including the red-headed elder, that greeted the bronze-armored Dao soldiers at the first instance. The 4 people were all real gods. The red-headed elder, who was the leader, was an eternal real god. When the 4 of them teamed up, as long as their opponent wasn't a chaotic real god, they could match evenly under normal circumstances. It happened to be among holy kingdoms, but not 10 cultivation sanctuary. What were the odds of meeting a chaotic real god? They wouldn't believe that they would run into a chaotic real god by luck. Plus, the brawny figure in bronze armor before them was obviously just a war puppet. Just how strong could a war puppet be? They couldn't be bothered. However, when both parties were in a fight, Hong, the bronze-armored Dao soldier, didn't know any massacre skills, only simple punches. However, the punches contained power that could compare to Sir Gods favorably. The moment the power exploded, the 4 real gods that barged in, including the red-headed elder, immediately stared. There was unprecedented fear from the bottoms of their hearts. They regretted it. But then, it was obviously too late. No matter how regretful they felt, the fierce power exploded. With one punch, the 4 real gods didn't even have the space to struggle, but instantly turned into blood fog from the punch. The 4 real gods died instantly. What? Those from Soul-Snatching Palace who stood on the spot and saw the scene were terrified. Even the 5 mysterious masked men. Their faces beneath the masks were covered in terror. However, the bronze-armored Dao soldiers charged to them without hesitation after he had killed the 4 real gods. Humph! The masked man, who was the leader, harumphed and a chaotic real god aura instantly exploded. The masked man took a stride forward and appeared in front of the bronze-armored Dao soldier. Then he punched. The bronze-armored Dao soldier punched as well. Both parties collided. It let out a loud bang. The masked man's body shook vigorously, and there was blood flowing down from underneath the mask. War puppet at almighty level? The masked man was terrified, and he instantly looked at the other 4 make men. Let's fight together. Use that move. The 4 of them nodded. Then, the 5 masked men instantly had blood fog churning from their bodies. The blood god concentrated and instantly formed a blood giant. The blood giant was about 3 meters tall, and there was billowing flame. He roared and charged at the bronze-armored Dao soldier. The blood giant and bronze-armored Dao soldiers fought. Both parties' powers clashed, and it was obvious that the bronze-armored Dao soldier had the upper hand. However, the advantageous position wasn't obvious. In the silver spaceship, Jian Wushuang and his troops saw the scene outside. When Jian Wushuang saw the 5 masked men let out blood fog and formed a blood giant, there was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. As expected, Jian Wushuang's gaze became extremely cold. Previously, Jian Wushuang had felt a strange blood aura from the unique mark that was left on the disciple of Luo royal family. The blood aura didn't belong to anyone. However, the blood aura couldn't certify anything. However, when he saw the blood giant that the 5 masked men performed, Jian Wushuang's speculation was verified. The Kruer formation. It is the Kruer formation exclusively owned by Holocaust sect. These few humph. King of venomous worms humphed coldly, and he had obviously recognized the few people's origins. Holocaust sect. That's right. The 5 masked men were no doubt experts from Holocaust sect. Although they were only 5 chaotic real gods, and they weren't considered the highest positioned, there was no doubt about their identity. The assistance that Soul-Snatching Palace got was men from Holocaust sect? Jian Wushuang was soaring with rage. His willpower moved, and there was a resplendent golden light that soared up in the air. Under Jian Wushuang's manipulation, the golden light burst out. On the battlefield outside the spaceship, the 5 masked men already gave their all to perform the Kruer formation. However, the blood giant that they formed could barely withstand the bronze-armored Dao soldiers' attack. Suddenly, a golden light flew over. These masked men who were merely real gods, and also the remaining cultivators of Soul-Snatching Palace, didn't manage to respond at all. Pust, 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 pust. There were deep noises that resounded. In the blink of an eye, the numerous figures in black floating outside were pierced by the golden light. The last remaining person, the masked man who was the leader, was left standing there alive. A huge hand appeared from nowhere and took the masked man into the spaceship. Chapter 1939 Abnormal. In the ancient silver spaceship it was dead silent. The disciples of the Luo royal family were astonished. Even Luo Feng and Luo Tianhong, who were the 2 leading figures, were shocked. Although they were in the cabin, they could see what happened outside clearly. At first, they knew that the people who could drive such a spaceship were definitely experts. However, they were fighting against Soul-Snatching Palace, especially the 5 masked men. Back then, the 5 masked men had attacked and wiped out the Luo royal family. Hence, they were terrified. But in the end, everyone else from Soul-Snatching Palace had been killed besides the masked man, who appeared to be the leader. He was captured alive. Even Jian Wushuang and the rest had yet to reveal themselves. Merely a war puppet and a golden light. It took care of everything easily. They? Who are they? It stirred up a great commotion in the hearts of the Luo royal family members. However, Jian Wushuang didn't care about them. His eyes were cold as he looked at the masked man in the black robe in front of him. Although the masked man in the black robe was covered by the mask, he could tell from his eyes that he was extremely terrified. The golden light is too scary. Chaotic real gods didn't even stand a chance to struggle before they were instantly killed. The person who performed the golden light is definitely an almighty. The masked man in the black robe shivered in fear. He had never expected that he would come across an almighty when he was after the remaining members of the Luo royal family. Tell me, what's the relationship between Holocaust sect and Soul-Snatching Palace? Jian Wushuang asked in a peaceful tone. The masked man in the black robe felt his heart skip a beat. He replied without many expressions, I offended Mr. by accident. Please forgive me. As for the Holocaust sect that Mr. mentioned, I have no idea what you are talking about. No idea? Jian Wushuang sneered. It was the Kruer formation by Holocaust sect. Do you think I don't recognize it? The masked man in the black robe quivered and didn't dare to quibble further. The Kruer formation was exclusively owned by Holocaust sect. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to see through the formation. Even out of almighties, Only those who were more knowledgeable could recognize it. The masked man in the black robe had trusted in luck, and thought Jian Wushuang might not know the origins of the formation. But then, however, as his identity was recognized, the masked man in the black robe didn't intend to say much. "You don't want to say? It's okay." Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and suddenly lifted his head. "Look at me." The masked man in the black robe looked at Jian Wushuang subconsciously. Just as his gaze met Jian Wushuang's, Virum, there was a boundless soul power that surged. The soul power instantly immersed itself into the masked man's head and violated his consciousness. Soul control. Jian Wushuang was going to soul control him. With his current soul power, it wasn't difficult to soul control a real god. The masked man in the black robe struggled for a while, but he resumed tranquility very quickly. "Master." The masked man in the black robe bowed to Jian Wushuang politely, and there was passion in his eyes. "I'll ask you something," Jian Wushuang immediately questioned. The masked man in the black robe was soul-controlled, and he naturally wouldn't keep any secrets from Jian Wushuang. Very soon, Jian Wushuang had got the answers that he wanted. "Soul-snatching palace is really involved with Holocaust sect," Jian Wushuang muttered. According to the masked man in the black robe's information, Soul-snatching palace had managed to wipe out Luo royal family and conquered the entire Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo thanks to full support from Holocaust sect. Then, Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo looked as though they were ruled by Soul-snatching palace. But in actual fact, Holocaust sect was fully controlled by Holocaust sect. In Soul-snatching palace's old lair, there were many experts from Holocaust sect. Among them, not only were there real god experts in masks, there were even people of Blood Demon level from Holocaust sect. Blood Demon from Holocaust sect was only a title. It represented experts of Sir God level. In Soul Snatching Palace, there were Sir Gods from Holocaust sect, more than one of them. Of course, the masked man in the black robe that Jian Wushuang had soul-controlled couldn't be considered a higher-up of Holocaust sect. Hence, he didn't know how many experts from Holocaust sect were in Soul Snatching Palace. That's strange. Holocaust sect has been in the dark all this while. Even though they control many forces in the dark, they have been extremely careful in their actions. Even if they need to refine treasures and improve their power to massacre, they would massacre the entire territory with thunderous measures and leave immediately. But now, Holocaust sect has helped Soul Snatching Palace in action and conquered the Holy Kingdom? Although they are still careful and never reveal their identity as Holocaust sect, they obviously came into the light after all. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He found the behavior of Holocaust sect fishy. Regardless, as Holy Kingdom of Celestial Fountain is controlled by Holocaust sect, I can't just ignore it, Jian Wushuang muttered and immediately took out a token. The token belonged to Purple Moon Emperor. Jian Wushuang sent Purple Moon Emperor a message directly. Jian Wushuang, you said that you met people from Holocaust sect and Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo, who were already conquered by Holocaust sect. Purple Moon Emperor was shocked. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded. I find this fishy, Purple Moon Emperor muttered. Hold on for a while. Jian Wushuang waited. Then, Purple Moon Emperor sent another message soon after. Jian Wushuang, I just spoke to Ancestor Tianchen. He also thought that Holocaust sect behaved unusually this time. Sanctuary Alliance has been dealing with Holocaust sect for so many years, and they have never been so high profile. There is definitely a reason behind it, Purple Moon Emperor said. I thought so too, Jian Wushuang said. Ancestor Tianchen said that you are also one of the members from Sanctuary Alliance. As you happen to come across this affair, he wishes for you to clarify this and wipe off all experts from Holocaust sect, Purple Moon Emperor said. Sure. Jian Wushuang nodded and agreed straight away. Holocaust sect and Acheron Palace. The two dark forces were Sanctuary Alliance's biggest enemies. Jian Wushuang was also a member from Sanctuary Alliance. He naturally wouldn't refuse. Plus, as for the reason why Jian Wushuang agreed so heartily, besides the fact that he was a member of Sanctuary Alliance, there was also another reason. It was Lung Ruxue. Lung Ruxue, Lord Lung, was also a member of Holocaust sect. He wanted to know the whereabouts of Lung Ruxue. It would be best to start with the experts in Holocaust sect. He happened to run into one, and he naturally wouldn't miss it. If you were to run into any problem or trouble, drop me a message. And be careful. Holocaust isn't an easy opponent. Purple Moon Emperor exhorted, and then cut off their communication. Chapter 1940 Duan Lingfeng's arrival. Master, what should we do next? Jianyi looked. Let's send the disciples of the Luo royal family to Holy Kingdom of South Plume first. Then, let's head back to Holy Kingdom of South Plume and make a trip to Soul-Snatching Palace, Jian Wushuang said. How about him? King of Venomous Worms pointed at the masked man in black robe that Jian Wushuang had soul-controlled. Keep him for now. Jian Wushuang's face was cold. Holocaust sect has always been very careful. We will keep him to stay in touch with Holocaust sect. Don't let Holocaust sect get suspicious and flee ahead of time. Let's continue our journey. Jian Wushuang's willpower moved, and the ancient silver spaceship started traveling forward again. The remaining journey was rather smooth. Very soon, everyone arrived at the territory of Holy Kingdom of South Plume. Just as they arrived in the territory, a large crowd surrounding a middle-aged man in a purple robe came forward. It's the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume. Monarch came personally. Let's go. Hurry up and head out too. The disciples of the Luo royal family immediately walked out of the spaceship to greet. Very soon, they met each other, and the exchange of conventional greetings was inevitable. Bother Luo's juniors, only a few of you left? The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume looked at the dozen of disciples of the Luo royal family as he sighed emotionally. Then, the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume looked at Jian Wushuang and the other few on the spaceship from afar. Just as he saw Jian Wushuang, the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume gawked. Swoosh! The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume moved and appeared in front of the spaceship. Excuse me, are you Sword Emperor, Mr. Jian Wushuang? The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume sounded fearful. You know me? Jian Wushuang glanced at the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume. The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume immediately knelt before Jian Wushuang. Greetings, Sword Emperor. Mister, I just met a good friend of mine not too long ago. My good friend came from 10 cultivation sanctuaries, and he had a copy of the mirror image where Sword Emperor performed the shocking stroke in the galaxy. I saw the scene where you killed the experts from Almighty's Alliance. I recognized you from the mirror image, and also Mr. Jianyi next to you. Oh, I see. Jian Wushuang nodded coldly. However, the experts from Holy Kingdom of South Plume that came with the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume and the disciples of the Luo royal family were shocked. They had never expected that the monarch of a holy kingdom would kneel and kowtow before so many of them without caring about his identity. He kowtowed. As a chaotic real god, a monarch of a holy kingdom, he was on eminent position. One who could make him kowtow would be **MN. Just what kind of an existence did we come across on the way here? The blue-haired lady Luofeng was thrilled. As for the other disciples of the Luo royal family, they were astonished too. Previously, when they had seen Jian Wushuang killing people from Soul-Snatching Palace with ease, they had already known that he was extraordinary. However, they had never expected that Jian Wushuang had the power to make a monarch of a holy kingdom kowtow. Get up! Jian Wushuang waved his sleeve, and the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume couldn't help but stand up uncontrollably. Then Jian Wushuang had looked at the Luo royal family members. I already escorted you here safely. Now, I am going to make a trip to Soul-Snatching Palace. Would any of you like to follow me? To Soul-Snatching Palace? The disciples of the Luo royal family were stunned. Forgive me for the intrusion. What are you heading to Soul-Snatching Palace for? The purple-haired youth Luo Tianhong asked. You'll know when we get there. Jian Wushuang didn't explain much. The disciples of the Luo royal family exchanged a look. Then Luo Tianhong took a step forward. Mister, I will follow you. Sure. Jiao Wushuang nodded faintly. Brother Tianhong? The other disciples looked worried. Don't worry. I am merely making a trip with this mister. I will return very soon. Luo Tianhong comforted the other disciples. The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume exhorted softly. No matter what this mister tells you to do it without hesitation. Do you understand? Hearing what the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume had said, Luo Tianhong nodded heavily. Looking at the sight, Jian Wushuang smiled. He had no other intention when he brought Luo Tianhong. He merely wanted to recommend him to his best friend. Mister, when do we go? Luo Tianhong asked softly. We're not in a hurry. Just wait for a bit. Jian Wushuang replied coldly. A huge silver spaceship waited in the void. As for the troops from Holy Kingdom of South Plume, they waited in silence too. Jian Wushuang didn't leave, and the monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume didn't dare to leave either. Very soon, a figure appeared at the far end. He's here. Jian Wushuang revealed a smile, and he moved to greet him in the void. Haha, Duan Lingfeng, you're finally here? Jian Wushuang let out a hearty laugh. After I received your message, I took the space-time wormhole to rush over at the first instant. I already came here with my fastest speed possible. Don't complain that I'm slow. Duan Lingfeng in a white robe and carrying a saber looked cold, but there was gentleness in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, and he had been through trials and tribulations together. When Jian Wushuang had been in danger, he had stood up for him. Back when he had been cornered by Four Symbol Mansion, Jian Wushuang had rushed there to resolve his dangerous situation too. They were sworn friends in life and death. Jian Wushuang didn't put on airs when he was talking to his friend. Duan Lingfeng was a cold man normally, but when he was talking to Jian Wushuang, he was much friendlier. Let go to the spaceship and talk. Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng immediately returned to the silver spaceship. Then, the silver spaceship immediately plunged towards the direction of Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. Farewell, mister. The monarch of Holy Kingdom of South Plume watched as the silver spaceship departed. In the boundless dark void, the silver spaceship plunged at a high speed. In the cabin, Jian Wushuang, Duan Lingfeng and King of Venomous Worms sat together while Jian Yi and Qiuyu stood by them in reverence. As for the purple-haired youth, Luo Tianhong, he stayed outside the cabin and continued to practice his saber skill. Luo Tianhong didn't know that the purpose of Jian Wushuang's trip was to wipe out Soul-Snatching Palace. He was filled with boundless hatred, and he wanted to increase his power with all his might, so that he could take revenge on behalf of the Luo royal family. The scene was naturally in the sight of Jian Wushuang and the others. The young man outside is the disciple that you want to recommend to me? Duan Lingfeng looked at Jian Wushuang as he held the wine glass. Yes, what do you think? Jian Wushuang smiled. He is very talented. His saber skill and comprehension of massacre doctrine is similar to mine. But talent and power aren't enough to become my disciple. Even if he is suitable to become my disciple, I must be willing to take him as my disciple, Jian Wushuang said coldly. His thoughts were all about how to break through and become an almighty. He had never thought about taking disciples. Don't be in a hurry. Let's watch and see. Jian Wushuang smiled. Chapter 1941. Barging into Soul-Snatching Palace. On the huge land that was floating. The floating land was where the imperial city of Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo was located. But then, Luo royal family was exterminated, and the imperial city fell into the hands of Soul-Snatching Palace. The lair of Soul-Snatching Palace was set up there as well in order to take control of the entire Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. Although I have no idea what the goal of Holocaust sect was regardless, I'll just exterminate them straight away. Jian Wushuang overlooked the huge floating land as his eyes glowed with a chilly gleam. Duan Lingfeng, you go first, Jian Wushuang said. No problem. Duan Lingfeng didn't hesitate as he moved towards the huge floating land. Rumble. There was an extremely fierce real god aura that swept out. The real god aura was almost unbelievable among real gods. Who is it? Stop! Someone shouted, and there were suddenly a few figures that burst out. Hearing the shouts, Duan Lingfeng didn't stop his footsteps. Courting death. Someone shouted again. There were a bunch of figures that burst out from soul-snatching soul, and let out fierce auras. There were as many as 6 real gods. In the void afar, Jian Wushuang and the few others stood there and watched quietly. Mister, Will we just watch as Mr. Duan barge into soul-snatching palace alone? The purple-haired youth Luo Tianhong creased his eyebrows. He already knew what Jian Wushuang's plan was. He was there to exterminate soul-snatching palace. However, soul-snatching palace was a dangerous spot. Mr. Duan had barged in alone. Wouldn't it be extremely dangerous? Don't worry, just watch. Jian Wushuang looked calm. On the floating land, there was an explosion of war. Duan Lingfeng, who was in a white robe, held his saber in one hand, and he looked as though he had transformed into a demon. With a billowing massacre aura, the boundless massacre doctrine formed a massacre realm that covered the entire universe. In terms of comprehension of massacre doctrine, Dean Lingfeng had obviously reached the standard of the 7th level of Doctrine Palace. It was already the standard of an almighty. His saber skill was even scarier. No matter how great the number of real God and universe God were there from soul-snatching palace, they were just clay chickens and pottery dogs, completely useless. He had massacred and left behind a sea of blood. There was no one who could withstand his saber lights that he performed with ease. With his power alone, he had barged into the lair of soul-snatching palace and massacred rampantly. Luo Tianhong was dumbfounded at the sight. He was shocked at the power displayed by Duan Lingfeng. He's so powerful. Mr. Duan is so powerful. They are real gods, but one casual slash of his saber could kill 3 of them. The higher-ups from Soul-Snatching Palace teamed up and formed a formation to block, but he broke them apart with one slash. He is that powerful. It stirred a great commotion in Luo Tianhong's heart. He had always stayed in Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo. He had only wandered in a few other holy kingdoms nearby. Although he had some experience, he wasn't as knowledgeable and experienced. In his eyes, real gods were already high above, especially those who were eternal real gods and chaotic real gods. Especially chaotic real gods. In a normal situation, a chaotic real god could take over a holy kingdom and become a ruler easily. For instance, the strongest person in Luo royal family, monarch of Sky Luo, was only a chaotic real god. He was also the strongest person Luo Tianhong had ever seen. But then, Duan Lingfeng's rampant massacre and the power he displayed had exceeded Luo Tianhong's imagination. Those black-robed masked men appeared. Luo Tianhong's heart clenched. He saw that there were dozens of black-robed figures with savage masks who had appeared on the battlefield. Those black-robed masked men were all powerful. The weakest of them was a top eternal real god. Most of them were chaotic real gods. The dozens of them teamed up to hem Duan Lingfeng in. Mr. Duan is in danger. Luo Tianhong was worried. But in the end, Virum. A cold saber light swept, and more than half of the dozens of black-robed masked man were wiped out by the merciless blade light. Then, Duan Lingfeng casually swung his saber at the remaining few. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of black-robed masked men were wiped out. This is too scary. Luo Tianhong stared. Jian Wushuang next to him wasn't surprised at such an outcome. Luo Tianhong, what do you think of my best friend's power? Jian Wushuang suddenly asked. Mr. Duan is the strongest person I have ever seen in saber skill and comprehension of massacre doctrine, Luo Tianhong said in a serious tone. Of course, he is widely acknowledged as the #1 real god in eternal chaotic world. Jian Wushuang smiled and said, #1 real god in eternal world? Luo Tianhong stunned. Although he had never been to 10 cultivation sanctuaries, he knew just how impressive it was to be a #1 real god in eternal world. Of course, they had said that Duan Lingfeng was the #1 real god in eternal world, without taking Jian Wushuang into consideration. Because in eternal chaotic world, there was no one who treated Jian Wushuang as a real god anymore. Luo Tianhong, you are also good at saber skills, and you are also comprehending massacre doctrine. Don't you want to be his disciple? Jian Wushuang casually asked. Be formally apprenticed to Mr. Duan? Luo Tianhong was stunned and his eyes immediately shimmered. I, of course, want to be formally apprenticed to him. I wonder if Mr. Duan is willing to take me as his disciple. You can give it a try, Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang looked as though he was casually speaking, but Luo Tianhong took his advice seriously. He looked at Duan Lingfeng, who was massacring rampantly, and he made up his mind. Just then there was a fierce divine might that suddenly soared. The divine might was high and above, and it instantly engulfed the universe. On the floating land, the cultivators were shivering in fear under such divine might. Some even knelt down straight away. Luo Tianhong looked terrified. There was a malicious smile that spread across Jian Wushuang's face. The cold-looking elder in a black robe was the one who gave out the divine might. When Jian Wushuang saw the cold-looking elder, his gaze was fixed. He someone familiar. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He wondered if it was a coincidence. He had met the cold-looking elder once. It was many years ago, back when Jian Wushuang was just a stage 2 ultimate real god. It was too difficult for him to accumulate ultimate divine power in his body. Hence, he went to Divine Pond of Absolute Beginning that was controlled by Sir God Luoshas under the lead of Sir God Mad Dog. When Jian Wushuang was taking in the power of Absolute Beginning in Divine Pond of Absolute Beginning, the experts from Holocaust sect happened to barge in. Then there were 4 Sir Gods who came. The cold-looking elder was one of them. In the end, Jian Wushuang, Sir God Mad Dog, and Sir God Luosha had teamed up to fight off the other 4 Sir Gods. They had even killed His Highness Mu Hong. Now he had crossed paths with the cold-looking elder again. Chapter 1942 The Seventh Palace Master. On the battlefield, Duan Lingfeng was already fighting with the cold-looking elder. Although the cold-looking elder was a Sir God, Duan Lingfeng was number 1 on Real God ranking list. He was powerful enough to fight with him. He would definitely not be defeated in a short period of time. Mister, you said that Mr. Duan is the number 1 real God in Eternal World. The person that is fighting with him now seems to be slightly stronger than him. Could he be the legendary Almighty? Luo Tianhong couldn't help but ask. Yes, an Almighty, Jian Wushuang answered. He really is, Luo Tianhong gasped. To cultivators who stayed in their holy kingdoms all year round, an Almighty was definitely like a figure from the legend. Mr. Duan, who is only a real god, can fight with a legendary Almighty like that. He lives up to his reputation as the number 1 real god in Eternal World, Luo Tianhong complimented. Jian Wushuang, let's fight. Otherwise, your best friend might not be able to endure for long, King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. King of Venomous Worms immediately moved and returned to Jian Wushuang's body. Xiao Yu, stay on the spaceship with this young man, Jian Wushuang exhorted. Yes, Xiao Yu nodded. Then Jian Wushuang and Jian Yi flew to the huge floating land. Just as they landed on the land, rumble! A terrifying divine might flowed out of Jian Wushuang's body. The power of the divine might was stronger by tens of folds than the full divine might shown by the cold-looking elder. The divine might was like a prison, as it engulfed the entire land. The cultivators on the land, including the men from Soul-Snatching Palace, were terrified. With such terrifying divine might, it finally startled the expert who was hidden in the deepest place of the land. Then, there were fierce auras that burst out from the depth of the land, also known as the old lair of Soul-Snatching Palace. A few figures appeared one after another. They gathered with the cold-looking elder. There was a total of 7 figures floating in the air. Just like 7 gods. So many of them? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew that there were experts from Holocaust sect within Soul-Snatching Palace, and there might even be Almighties. However, he had never expected that in Soul-Snatching Palace itself, they hid a total of 7 Almighties. Most importantly, among the 7 Almighties, there were not only Sir Gods. There were only 4 Sir Gods, and the other 3 were Emperor Gods. 3 Emperor Gods and 4 Sir Gods. That was the powerful team formation in front of Jian Wushuang. Among the 3 Emperor Gods, the one leading was a golden-robed man with a crimson monstrous mask. The golden-robed masked man stood there and pressed down on Jian Wushuang with pressure. Without a doubt, the golden-robed masked man was a true peak Emperor God. Interesting. Such a minor force like Soul-Snatching Palace is impressive enough to contain 7 gods. There's even a peak Emperor Gods, Jian Wushuang smiled. His smile was cold like a blade. The 7 Almighties stared at Jian Wushuang. The pair of eerie golden eyes that were revealed by the golden-robed masked men were looking at Jian Wushuang, as he let out boundless resentment. You are Jian Wushuang. The golden-robed man sounded cold, and the air froze in an instant. You know me? It seems that I am quite famous in Holocaust sect. Jian Wushuang rubbed his nose. I am the 7th Palace Master of Holocaust sect. The golden-robed masked man stared at Jian Wushuang as murderous intention swept out. Jian Wushuang, I finally found you. Give me my son back. Jian Wushuang was stunned. Your son? Could it be His Highness Mu Hong? Although Jian Wushuang had crossed paths with Holocaust sect multiple times, the only expert from Holocaust sect that died had at his hand was His Highness Mu Hong. Plus, Jian Wushuang had always thought that His Highness Mu Hong had a background. From what it seemed, he should be his father, the golden-robed masked man before him. With a peak emperor god as his father, no wonder His Highness Mu Hong would be so arrogant, Jian Wushuang sneered. Save your nonsense. I will take revenge on my son's behalf today. Die. The golden-robed masked man bellowed, and his peak emperor god aura instantly locked onto Jian Wushuang as his target. His body immediately increased tremendously in size to 10 zhang tall. His golden robe turned into boundless golden clouds. Rumble! A huge golden mountain appeared in the sky above. The golden mountain continuously magnified and pressed down on everything in the universe. That very moment, it pressed down on Jian Wushuang. Looking at the golden mountain above him, Jian Wushuang's eyes dilated in shock. As the golden mountain pressed on him, he could clearly feel a suppressing power. If not mistaken, the golden mountain should be a suppressing treasure that was rare. Plus, the power had reached the level of chaotic divine treasure. Chaotic divine treasure is rare to begin with. A suppressing chaotic divine treasure is even harder to come by, Jian Wushuang muttered. Even he felt danger approaching when he was under the golden mountain. My 7 stars are all broken. My power of ancient tribe bloodline has just recovered by a slight bit, and my power isn't at its peak. I am at a disadvantage when I am fighting with the 7th Palace Master, who has suppressing chaotic divine treasure. Jian Wushuang thought, and immediately looked at Jianyi next to him. Take care of this person. Kill him. Jian Wushuang commanded. Yes. Jianyi nodded politely, and there was immediately a crimson cloud churning on his body. There was crimson fog that gathered in the sky, and instantly formed a crimson ocean to engulf the entire huge golden mountain. The golden mountain displayed its power that was fierce. However, when it hit the crimson ocean, it as though it had hit a ball of cotton. What? The golden masked man, also the 7th Palace Master, couldn't help but steal a glance at Jianyi. However, Jianyi didn't stop, and his figure grew illusionary and charged towards the 7th Palace Master. Humph! The 7th Palace Master humphed coldly. When Jianyi got closer, he took out a huge seal with a flip of his wrist. On the huge seal, there was a golden dragon that carried a powerful aura. It was an extremely unique chaotic divine treasure. As the 7th Palace Master patted the seal let out an intense golden glow. The golden dragon on the seal instantly became alive. Roar! A terrifying dragon roar reverberated in the universe. The golden dragon suddenly became tens of thousands of zhang in length. It contained boundless imposing power as it charged at Jianyi. The golden dragon gave Jian Wushuang a feeling that it could match evenly with an ordinary peak emperor god. This 7th Palace Master has so many treasures on hand? Jian Wushuang was shocked. Chapter 1943. Unaware of the aureole behind. From the golden mountain to the golden dragon seal, the 7th Palace Master took out 2 golden spears. The 2 golden spears carried extraordinary aura as well. They were also chaotic divine treasure. He really had a lot of treasure with him. Treasures are great, but in terms of his power, he is only an emperor god after all. He would at most be similar to Palace Wu Luo from Abysmal Palace. Even with the assistance of the treasure, he definitely wasn't Jianyi's match. Jian Wushuang sneered when he looked at the other 6 almighties nearby. Jianyi could take care of the 7th Palace Master. But these other 6? Die. There was a flash of murderous intention in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Then, 4 Hongyung golden swords soared up at the same time. They instantly became 4 resplendent golden lights. The 4 golden lights were unbelievably fast as they flew at the 6 Almighties. Die! Kill him! The 6 Almighties were soaring with murderous intention. There was no fear in them. They immediately let their power into full play and fought with Jian Wushuang. Although the 6 of them had teamed up, their powers were vastly different from Jian Wushuang's. Jian Wushuang only drove the 4 Hongjun golden swords to attack rampantly, and he killed 4 Sir Gods at lightning speed. As for the remaining 2 Emperor Gods who had ordinary fighting powers, they didn't last long either before they were killed by Jian Wushuang. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang's body floated in the void, and the 4 Hongjun golden sword returned to his sides as he looked down at the 6 dead bodies on the ground. However, he was shocked. One should know that the 6 Almighties were obviously not his match. They would totally be suppressed if they fought with him. However, the 6 Almighties had no intention to retreat even though they knew so. There was only madness that wanted to kill him. Almighties, every single one of that went through so much. They should look highly upon their lives. However, the 6 of them seemed to have put their lives aside. What is going on? Jian Wushuang muttered. Not only the 6 Almighties, but Jian Wushuang also noticed that the 7th Palace Master who was fighting with Jian Yi was the same. He had played all his trump cards, and he was still suppressed by Jian Yi. Theoretically, at such a crucial moment, he should run for his life. But in actual fact, he had no intention to flee. Just then, humph! The 7th Palace Master suddenly humphed coldly, and the aura on his body suddenly increased at a terrifying speed. This is soul ignition. Jian Wushuang's face suddenly changed. He wasn't unfamiliar with soul ignition. Back when he had invited Colored Glaze Emperor God and Emperor God Jiu Yin to Deluge Fortress, when they had besieged Fortress Master Hong Tian, he had been cornered into a desperate situation, and he performed soul ignition and swore to counterattack. But in the end, Jian Wushuang and his troops had killed him. Once one soul was ignited, his overall power would increase tremendously in a short period of time. However, the price to pay was definite death. Only an expert who was above peak Emperor God could pull off that move. If one wasn't at a final desperate situation, no one would do so. Then, although the 7th Palace Master was cornered by Jian Yi, he would stand no chance to flee with all the treasures and trump cards that he had. But he soul ignited to counterattack without hesitation? He's mad! Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Jian Wushuang, I want you dead! The mask on the 7th Palace Master shattered and revealed an old ugly face. The face was then distorted and ferocious looking. Because of soul ignition, the power that he let out had reached a brand new level. In collaboration with the treasures he had, his fighting power was extraordinary. Jian Yi, block him! Jian Wushuang roared. Jian Yi naturally wouldn't hesitate to go forward and fight a fierce battle. Plus, he put his full power on display. Bang! 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 There was continuous explosions that resounded in the universe. The sky was filled with divine power, and the floating land quivered madly. Luckily, there were countless cultivators on the land that fled far away. Otherwise, the battle could destroy everything on land. Hong! There was another explosion, and the floating land shattered into pieces entirely. Jian Wushuang! Jian Wushuang! An angry roar reverberated in the universe. The hysterical roar brought about boundless madness and unwillingness. This man! Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze at the 7th Palace Master solemnly, as his face grew distressed. He felt glad that he had brought Jian Yi with him. The 7th Palace Master couldn't break through Jian Yi's guard and come before him even if he soul ignited. But if he was alone, his power of 7-star had yet to recover. There were many trump cards that he had yet to perform. If he were to fight against the 7th Palace Master at such a crucial moment, he might really be in danger. Time flew past. After a while, the 7th Palace Master's consciousness started fleeing along with his ignited soul. They started to disperse. After a while, the 7th Palace Master's aura finally vanished into thin air and he died. Is he dead? Jian Wushuang let out a breath of relief. Oh yeah, his treasure. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed. The 7th Palace Master had many treasures. He immediately wanted to go forward. Suddenly, just as he approached the 7th Palace Master's dead body, the surrounding dark void suddenly shattered. Then, a ghostly figure leaped out from the broken void. Then, she waved and took the 7th Palace Master's dead body along with his Qian Kuan ring and his treasures. Courting death. Jian Wushuang grew distressed, and the 4 Hongjun golden sword burst out. Jian Yi, who was near to the 7th Palace Master's dead body, plunged forward as well. The ghostly figure smirked coldly and dodged. Her body moved to somewhere far away. The 4 Hongjun golden swords and Jian Yi's attack missed. Sword Emperor, don't be angry. There was a soft voice. The person steadied herself, and it was an old lady in black robe. Although she was only a Sir God, she gave Jian Wushuang a strange feeling. Forget about the others. The old lady in the black robe had been hiding in the surrounding dark void for so long, but both Jian Wushuang and Jian Yi didn't notice her at all. She shouldn't be belittled by that factor alone. Who are you? Jian Wushuang's gaze was cold as he looked at the old lady in the black robe. It doesn't matter who I am. Sword Emperor, you only need to know that I come at my master's command. My master's surname is Lung. Sword Emperor should know her. The old lady in black robe smiled as she spoke. Jian Wushuang's body stiffened at her speech. Surname Lung? Lord Lung. Jian Wushuang's gaze was turned cold. Lord Lung. No, my master is no longer the Lord but Holocaust Sect Master. Chapter 1944 Holocaust Sect Master? Sect Master? Jian Wushuang's face grew in distress. He heard from Emperor Bai earlier that Holocaust Sect had gone through a drastic change. Someone united them using thunderous measures. However, he had never expected the one who united Holocaust Sect would be Lung Wuxia. Speaking of which, Holocaust Sect has to thank Sword Emperor for helping Holocaust Sect to take care of these betrayers. Otherwise, Holocaust Sect has to use time and effort to deal with them. The old lady in black robe smiled. Jian Wushuang glanced at the few Almighty's dead bodies around him, and he understood then. No wonder the experts from Holocaust Sect had decided to maintain high profile. They didn't even flee when they saw him coming, but opted to fight a life-and-death battle. From what it seemed, these people already betrayed Holocaust Sect, and they were eyed by Lung Wuxia. If he wasn't not mistaken, there should have been marks on their bodies long ago. They had never fled. In other words, they were actually dead for sure. They were only waiting for Holocaust Sect to kill them. It was just that Holocaust Sect had yet to take action, but they had met Jian Wushuang. Sword Emperor, for what happened today, I thank you on behalf of my master. Farewell. The old lady in black robe smiled maliciously as her figure suddenly became blurry. Want to leave? Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold, and there was a purple bead in his hand. Under Jian Wushuang's manipulation of his will vroom, boundless purple light covered the light. In an instant, it formed a formation that covered a range of few millions miles. One realm pearl became formation at one's will. You can't run away. Jian Wushuang's voice resounded in the air. Hehe. I knew Sword Emperor has a treasure that turned into formation at your will. As I dared to take away the treasures in front of you, I naturally am well prepared. The old lady in the black robe smiled faintly. She flipped her hand and took out a token. The token broke and instantly shattered the void. There was a space tunnel that appeared from nowhere. What? Jian Wushuang was surprised. The formation that one realm pearl formed covered the entire space-time. But the token that he had taken out could ignore the space-time and form a space tunnel that connected to the outside world in such situation. Humph! Jian Wushuang let out a cold humph, and the divine power in his body flowed. At the same time, there was also minor power of ancient tribe bloodline that King of Venomous Worms barely recovered. Although his power of ancient tribe bloodline had only recovered by a slight bit, it was barely enough. Moon-picking skill. There was soaring divine power. Rumble. The space-time that the old lady in the black robe was in immediately faced unprecedented pressure. The space-time tunnel that appeared in the air started to distort from the pressure. *T. The old lady in the black robe's face grew grave. Just then from the space-time tunnel that was distorted Kwang, there was a lily-white hand that extended. The lily-white hand was clean without any flaw. At the same time, There was a cold aura that spread out from the other side of space-time tunnel that Jian Wushuang could never forget in his lifetime. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed when he sensed the aura. Lung Ruxue. Jian Wushuang glared at the space-time tunnel. The lily-white hand that extended from the space-time tunnel only moved casually, and the space-time that had been pressured earlier instantly settled down, and the space-time tunnel resumed normal. The old lady in the black robe seized the chance to enter the space-time tunnel and disappeared. The space-time tunnel then started to close gradually. Right before the space-time tunnel disappeared, there was suddenly a voice. Jian Wushuang. I never expected you to have the chance to reach where you are now. It's a pity that you are still far from saving her. Very far. Haha. There was a taint of disdain in her voice, and it reverberated in Jian Wushuang's ears. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands and watched the space-time tunnel disappear. His body quivered faintly. He felt extremely solemn from the bottom of his heart. Very far. What she said repeatedly rang in his head. With my power now, is it still not enough? Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth. Ever since he had left Green Fire World until then, it had been tens of thousands of years. He had been trying his best to increase his power and find ways to make himself stronger. No matter what kind of danger he faced, he would fight for a string of hope with his all. He did all that so that he could find Lung Ruxue one day and save her wife Lung Rushuang. After so many years, he had, though his improvement speed was shocking enough. Especially then, when he already stood on the peak of eternal chaotic world. Even the great emperors held scruples with him. However, he realized then that he was still not powerful enough. He was far from enough. Holocaust Sect is a hidden dark force that could match evenly with Sanctuary Alliance. Its overall power might not win over Sanctuary Alliance, but they shouldn't be too far apart. But she could unite Holocaust Sect and become Holocaust Sect Master with thunderous measure. Such power. Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn. Besides, the lily-white hand that extended from the space-time tunnel earlier must have been Lung Ruxue's. However, from the lily-white hand alone, although Jian Wushuang couldn't determine her true power, he was determined that Lung Ruxue must have reached the stage on par with Great Emperor. How could she improve so quickly? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Although a primordial great sinner has advantage in cultivation, she shouldn't have reached the level of Great Emperor in only tens of thousands of years. From what I see, she definitely received an impressive opportunity. King of Venomous Worms' voice rang in Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang nodded in silence. He obviously thought it was the only explanation as well. Jian Wushuang, don't be in a hurry. She received a great opportunity and became a great emperor in a short time. You are not too shabby yourself. Plus, you already received the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill. You only need some time until you leap to the 7th step. By then, you should be able to fight with her. You are definitely not far from possessing power enough to suppress her. King of Venomous Worms reassured. Jian Wushuang nodded heavily and he was confident too. Swoosh. Swoosh. There were two figures that appeared next to Jian Wushuang. Master. Jian looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, are you okay? Duan Lingfeng asked. I'm okay. Jian Wushuang shook his head. The Almighties from Holocaust Sect are wiped out. The remaining are just some real gods, and some people from Soul-Snatching Palace. Kill them all. Jian Wushuang was boiling with murderous intention. He waved and 4 bronze-armored Dao soldiers appeared simultaneously. In addition to Duan Lingfeng, Jian and himself, they massacred the experts from Soul-Snatching Palace mercilessly. Chapter 1945 Taking in a Disciple. Without Almighties, the remaining experts from Holocaust Sect and Soul-Snatching Palace naturally had no space to struggle when they were fighting against Jian Wushuang and his troop. In a short while, the entire Soul-Snatching Palace was exterminated. Only some extremely weak disciples managed to escape. In the vast void. Your name is Luo Tianhong, right? Duan Lingfeng's gaze was cold as he stared at the purple-haired young man in front of him. Yes. Luo Tianhong nodded solemnly as his eyes filled with enthusiasm. I arranged an opponent for you. If you can defeat him, I will take you in as a registered disciple. However, if you can't kill your opponent, you can only blame yourself. I will not help you, Duan Lingfeng said coldly. Registered disciple? Luo Tianhong licked his lips. He had already seen Duan Lingding's power. Although he wasn't as scary as Jian Wushuang, he was still a superb existence that made him passionate. To be able to be formally apprenticed to a superb existence, even though he was just a registered disciple, it was worthy for Luo Tianhong to fight for it. He is my opponent. Luo Tianhong looked at the brawny man in front of him. The brawny man's face was like a grave, covered in hopelessness. However, the aura he carried reached the level of a peak void real god. A universe god had to fight with the top void real god, and had to kill him. That was quite challenging. However, for a true top genius, it was doable. Forget about the others, at least Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng could do that when they were universe gods. Listen up. Duan Lingfeng looked at the brawny man. It'll give you a string of hope. Fight with your all. As long as you can kill your opponent, you can live. If not, die. The brawny man from Soul Snatching Palace originally felt hopeless. However, when he heard what Duan Lingfeng had said, his eyes glowed. He stared at Luo Tianhong, and an unprecedented murderous intention and hope of life soared. The power that a person had during his final crucial moment was the scariest. Let's begin, Duan Lingfeng said coldly. The two of them immediately fought in the void. One of them wanted to be formally apprenticed to Duan Lingfeng. The other merely wanted to survive. Both exploded their strongest fighting power. At the border of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang and Duan Lingfeng stood side by side. To have this young man fight with a top void real god, and the match will be called with life and death. Only you could think of such an idea, Jian Wushuang said. He wants to be my disciple. How could it be so simple? Plus, the opponent that I assigned to him is evenly matched after all. It couldn't be considered as unfair, Duan Lingfeng said coldly. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows but didn't say much. After all, it was Duan Lingfeng picking his disciple, not him. In the void, the battle between a universe god and a real god lasted for very long. Both parties have firm beliefs, and were extremely mad in the fight. In the end, it became a competition of willpower and endurance. Finally, the outcome of the match was out. The one who survived until the end was Luo Tianhong. He stood in the void as his figure quivered. He was covered in blood, and his face was pale but his eyes were shimmering with joy. In front of him was the dead body of the brawny man. I won. Luo Tianhong was excited. The blood in his body was boiling too. The battle could be considered as a transformation to this young man. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly as he watched. Not too shabby. Duan Lingfeng nodded faintly. Luo Tianhong defeated his opponent. According to what Duan Lingfeng had said earlier, he had taken him in as his registered disciple. Then, Luo Tianhong left with Duan Lingfeng. As for Jian Wushuang and his troop, they left Holy Kingdom of Sky Luo as well. On their way out, Jian Wushuang sent a message to Purple Moon Emperor and informed him about the ins and outs. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to hide anything, but he kept the relationship between himself and the Holocaust sect master, Lung Rushua, a secret. It seems that the news that Sanctuary Alliance got isn't false, Purple Moon Emperor exclaimed. Not long ago, although Holocaust sect master united Holocaust sect using thunderous measures, there are still many within Holocaust sect that aren't willing to follow their sect master's command. They are considered betrayers. Holocaust sect has been wiping out these traitors all this while. As for the 7th Palace Master, Sanctuary Alliance knew about him. Previously, Holocaust sect held great power and an eminent position. It's a pity that he wasn't on the same side with Holocaust sect master. Hence, after Holocaust sect master attacked, he brought a bunch of experts and fled. At the same time, he seemed to have brought along some treasures that Holocaust sect collected. It's a pity that these treasures didn't fall into your hands, but were taken away by Holocaust sect master. Jian Wushuang clearly understood when he heard that. Jian Wushuang, eternal chaotic world isn't peaceful. Holocaust sect and Acheron Palace are preparing to launch an attack. I reckon it wouldn't be long until they make a big movement again. Before that, you have to focus on cultivation and seize the time to break through. and become an almighty. You are an inverse cultivator. As soon as you become an almighty, you will be compared to a great emperor favorably. By then, you can be one of the highest fighting powers of Sanctuary Alliance. This is the most important task for you now, Purple Moon Emperor said. I understand, Jian Wushuang nodded. He also knew what was most important to him then. To step foot on the seventh step of inverse cultivation skill, breakthrough, and become an almighty should be the most important task on hand. Return to Green Fire World. The spiritual power is the most intense there. I will get the best result if I cultivate there, Jian Wushuang decided. An ancient silver spaceship immediately flew in the direction of Green Fire World. They passed through some space-time wormholes along the way. Jian Wushuang then arrived at Green Fire World in no time. Jian Wushuang had only left Green Fire World for a few thousand years. But in the few thousand years, there had been a drastic change in Green Fire World. Firstly, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth. A few thousand years ago, before Jian Wushuang left, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth in Green Fire World already far beyond 10 cultivation sanctuaries. Then, after a few thousand years of evolution, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth in Green Fire World, and the overall cultivation environment, was at least tens of times stronger than 10 cultivation sanctuaries. It was merely a conservative estimation that Jian Wushuang did. Jian Wushuang even thought the cultivation environment in Green Fire World could compare favorably with the first era. Even though there was a distance, it wasn't big. In such an outstanding cultivation environment, Green Fire World's cultivators naturally improved rather quickly under Jian Wushuang's guidance. Then, the number of universe gods in Green Fire World had more than tens of thousands of people. There was even more than 10 real gods. Chapter 1946 12,000 years. It has only been a few thousand years, Jian Wushuang exclaimed in surprise. In the small Green Fire World, the number of cultivators was far less than in other worlds. However, the experts in Green Fire World were about the same compared to an ordinary Holy Kingdom. Plus, Green Fire World continued to evolve, and it was improving at a shocking speed. Especially when Jian Wushuang came. He had brought complete guidance from real God to almighty level. In all aspects and a variety of them, he had brought back enormous resources. Jian Wushuang prepared all of that for Green Fire World when he was in Lineage of Star. If the guidance in Green Fire World was only to reach real God level, at most it could give birth to real God. Then Green Fire World possessed the ability to give birth to an almighty. Not only Sir Gods but also Emperor Gods. Green Fire World could give birth to them, but they needed time. Besides, after Jian Wushuang returned from Lineage of Star, he improved Wushuang City at the first instant. Then, he left behind richer resources and opportunities in Wushuang City. After that, Wushuang City became a true land of opportunity. As long as one was powerful and lucky enough, they would receive great opportunity in Wushuang City. I have prepared whatever I have to prepare. I tried my best to perfect the cultivation environment in Green Fire World. Now it depends on how hardworking the juniors in Green Fire World are. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He foresaw that in another few thousand years, or tens of thousands of years, Green Fire World would be well developed, and there would be countless experts sparring. Previously, Jian Wushuang had thought that Green Fire World would only possess the potential of becoming a new sanctuary in eternal chaotic world. However, from what it seemed, it wasn't just that. After that, Jian Wushuang started cultivating in seclusion in Wushuang City as well. In the secret room, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged. King of Venomous Worms, for the rest of this time, I have Vito depend on you, Jian Wushuang smiled. I'll take care of it. King of Venomous Worms nodded. The environment in Green Fire World is outstanding. It will be easier to recover your power of ancient tribe bloodline. With my ability, I should be able to fully recover your power of ancient tribe bloodline in 5,000 years. 5,000 years? Jian Wushuang was very contented with that. One should know that when his 6 stars broke, King of Venomous Worms had taken almost 7,000 years to fix it. Then he only needed 5,000 years, which was much shorter comparatively. The The power of ancient tribe bloodline would be passed to King of Venomous Worms, while Jian Wushuang fully concentrated on studying the seventh step of inverse cultivation skill. The seventh step of inverse cultivation skill was also the level of an almighty. In ancient times, it was called chaotic realm. As an inverse cultivator, the current stage was known as chaotic supreme. The realm was similar but the disposition was different. Every single step an inverse cultivator took was different from the others. Every single step taken was entirely different from an ordinary cultivator's. For instance, at real god level, just how scary was an inverse cultivator as ultimate real god? Jian Wushuang had been gifted with divine power and a divine body that were comparable favorably with an emperor god at his third stage ultimate real god level. Hence, he could perform such terrifying fighting power at real god level. The seventh step of an inverse cultivator, chaotic supreme, was different from chaotic realm of an ordinary cultivator. There was naturally a huge difference. As for where the difference was, Jian Wushuang had never reached that level. So he didn't know. I have reached the extreme limit of ultimate real God. My substantive soul has formed, and my comprehension of doctrine has reached the requirements. In other words, I have fulfilled all prerequisites to break through from real God to Almighty. Next, the only thing left is an opportunity. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and started cultivating. He didn't know how long he needed to break through, but he couldn't be in a hurry. He had to wait patiently. For the rest of the time, Jian Wushuang had been cultivating. Time was merciless, and it flew past. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had cultivated for 12,000 years in Wushuang City. 12,000 years wasn't long to many almighties in eternal chaotic world. On the contrary, it was a fairly short time. There were many immortals who cultivated in seclusion for at least 100,000 years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. However, to Jian Wushuang, 12,000 years was the longest period he had cultivated for. Although it had been man years, he didn't intend to exit seclusion. During the 12,000 years, regardless of if it was Lineage of Star or Green Fire World, it was very peaceful. Lineage of Star had gained a steady footing as the #1 force in Sanctuary Alliance. With Jian Wushuang serving as a deterrent force, all forces in Sanctuary Alliance didn't seem to have anyone who dared to challenge Lineage of Star. With such a position, Lineage of Star developed extremely quickly. Their overall power had been stronger, and their foundation became firmer too. As for Green Fire World, just like Jian Wushuang had expected, the speed of growth was terrifying. In merely 12,000 years, Green Fire World's overall power already reached a brand new level. There were more than 100 real gods, and there were countless universe gods. It was a pity that there had yet to be any almighties. Jian Wushuang also knew that with the assistance of an outstanding environment and abundant resources, it wouldn't be difficult for Green Fire World to give birth to universe god and real god. Or even chaotic real god could be nurtured much easier. However, for Almighty was different from real god after all. Green Fire World had the ability to nurture an Almighty. However, to give birth to an Almighty in a short period of time, it was still quite impossible. He reckoned that it would at least require continuous nurturing for 20,000 years, until Green Fire World give birth to an Almighty. In 100,000 years, Green Fire World should be barely comparable with a sanctuary in Eternal Chaotic World. However, it would be unrealistic if Green Fire World wanted to continue to nurture in peace for another 100,000 years. On the huge ancient battlefield, there was a huge head lying there in silence. The huge head was boundless. Green Fire World was located at the core of the head. It was merely a small dot on the head. At that very moment, there was a malicious-looking young man who appeared on the head. The malicious-looking young man was Emperor God Xia Xian. Emperor God Xia Xian had arrived at the battlefield over 12,000 years ago through the hidden space gap. Then, he had been wandering in the battlefield. Until then, it was already over 12,000 years. During the 12,000 years, he clearly knew how great the value of the ancient battlefield he was at was. Forget about the rest. In just 12,000 years, he obtained various kinds of opportunities. With the opportunities, his power had increased tremendously. Chapter 1947 Cultivator. So magical. The ancient battlefield is too magical, Emperor Wuxia Xian muttered. After he had wandered in the ancient battlefield for over 12,000 years, he knew the place better. There was no doubt that the ancient battlefield was more precious than the ancient mystery land. Not only because it was an ancient battlefield, it was much broader and vast than ancient mystery land. There were more opportunities as well. Most importantly, there was no one else wandering in the ancient battlefield. For instance, the ancient mystery land had opened countless times in the Second Era, let alone the First Era. Countless times of opening, and large numbers of experts would search for opportunities each time. Hence, many opportunities had been unearthed. Those that had yet to be revealed should be hard to obtain by others as well. However, the ancient battlefield was entirely different. Boundless opportunities contained were completely on display, and there were too many opportunities around. It's a pity that I am weaker in power, and my defense power isn't strong enough. There are many places with great opportunities, but I dare not wander. Otherwise, I could achieve even more. Emperor Wuxia Xian clenched his hands. He was very careful, very cautious. Once he noticed that something was not right, he would immediately leave. He'd rather not get the opportunity than taking a bigger risk. Because he was cautious, he had survived for over 12,000 years. Otherwise, the ancient battlefield that contained huge dangers would have killed him many times. Emperor Wuxia Xian thought. Just then, Emperor Wuxia Xian was surprised. He suddenly noticed the few auras within his soul power's sensory range. These are cultivators? Emperor Wuxia Xian was shocked. He thought that there was no one who knew the ancient battlefield, and there was only him alone who had the advantage. But then, he noticed other cultivators on the ancient battlefield, although the few cultivators were not powerful. Let's take a look first. Emperor Wuxia Xian squinted his eyes as he moved in the direction of the few cultivators. In the void, there were 4 figures flying forward slowly. There was a mixture of men and women. They looked really young, and they were only giving out universe god auras. The one leading them was a brown-haired young man, who was universe god in the 3rd heaven. We are reaching Purple Flame Realm soon. Be careful. Remember what Master said, the brown-haired young man urged. The other 3 people nodded faintly, and there was a tinge of excitement in their eyes. The 4 of them were from Greenfire World. They were cultivators that came for training in the ancient battlefield. They were also from the same sect. Greenfire World then was different from before. There were many real gods and also universe gods. There were so many cultivators who wandered in the surrounding battlefield looking for opportunity. It was naturally much easier to find opportunities on the battlefield. For instance, on the skull where Greenfire World was located, there was more than half of the territory that Greenfire World had probed and found more mystery land. Purple Flame Realm was one of them. Purple Flame Realm has a total of 3 levels. The danger on the first level is enough to kill many universe gods. As for the second levels, it is simply courting death if a universe god enters. Even when our master enters the second level, he has to be cautious and not reckless. As for the third level of Purple Flame Realm, in the entire Greenfire World, only the legendary Wuxia City Master could go in. Anyone else, including our masters or even our master's master, will definitely die once they enter. The brown-haired young man looked at the other 3 universe gods. The 4 of us can only challenge the first level in Purple Flame Realm at most, and we have to be extremely careful. As for the second level, don't even think about it. Understand? Yes, Senior Qing Hao. The other 3 nodded simultaneously. The 4 of them were chatting casually, but they didn't know that their conversation was being eavesdropped on by Emperor Wuxia Xian, who was hidden in the dark. 4 universe gods from the same sect? In their conversation earlier, they brought up about Purple Flame Realm, and also Greenfire World. Emperor Wuxia Xian had creased his eyebrows earlier. He had heard, and he instantly knew that Purple Flame Realm would be a unique place in the surrounding battlefield. The 4 universe gods should be wandering in Purple Flame Realm. However, Green Fire World, Emperor God Xie Xian didn't understand. Regardless, I'll know when I ask. Emperor God Xie Xian smirked coldly and immediately walked forward. The four universe gods went in the direction where Purple Flame Realm was, under the brown-haired young man's lead. But suddenly, Emperor God Xie Xian, who was malicious-looking, blocked their way. The four universe gods immediately stopped and four pairs of eyes fixed upon Emperor God Xie Xian. This person, the brown-haired young man's eyes dilated in shock. Although Emperor God Xie Xian before him didn't give out much aura, the brown-haired young man still felt extremely pressured. The pressure was much stronger than when he faced his own master. The brown-haired young man took a deep breath and immediately bowed. "Greetings, Senior. I am Junior Qing Hao." The brown-haired young man beckoned and bowed at Emperor God Xie Xian. Immortal Palace was one of the top 9 major forces in Green Fire World. They were very famous. The brown-haired young man, Qing Hao, should be a big figure in Immortal Palace. Theoretically, as long as the other person was experienced in Green Fire World, they should have heard of his name. However, Emperor God Xie Xian blinked and seemed confused. He had been in Eternal Chaotic World for so long, but he had never heard of a sect named Immortal Palace. "I have something I'd like to ask you." Emperor God Xie Xian looked at the four of them in front of him. "Yes, Senior. The four of us will tell you everything we know." Qing Hao seemed rather calm. "I heard your conversation earlier, and you talked about Green Fire World, and also Immortal Palace that you brought up yourself. I wonder if you could tell me in detail?" Emperor God Xie Xian smiled and asked, "Senior, you don't know about Green Fire World or Immortal Palace?" Qing Hao stared and has suddenly put his guard up. The other 3 disciples from Immortal Palace looked terrified as well. If the other party didn't know about Immortal Palace, it might be understandable. After all, Immortal Palace was established after the drastic change in Green Fire World. It had only been less than 20,000 years. Those who cultivate in seclusion most of the time during the year. It was normal if they didn't know about them. However, he didn't even know about Green Fire World. Obviously, he wasn't an expert from Green Fire World. Master, I met a mysterious expert on the ancient battlefield. He is from outside Green Fire World." Qing Hao didn't move, but he sent a message to his master in secret. Chapter 1948 Emperor God Xie Xian rejoiced with wild excitement. Qing Hao responded at the first instant. However, when he tried to send a message, "What happened? My message can't go through?" Qing Hao was shocked. Then, Emperor God Xie Xian had already seen through Qing Hao's actions. He sneered, "Young man, don't even think about sending messages. It's useless. I have already sealed off this space-time. With just 4 universe gods, you can't possibly break it. Don't even think about running away either." Then, there was pressing stress soaring from Emperor Xiezin's body. Pudong, 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 pudong. The 4 disciples from Immortal Palace, including the brown-haired young man, Qing Hao, knelt down straight away. Their heads were buzzing, and they couldn't come back to reality for quite some time. Finally, Qing Hao was the first one who recovered. He clenched his teeth as he glared at Emperor God Xie Xian. He understood that the opponent was far beyond their match. Forget about themselves, even their masters or masters' masters weren't his match. In other words, it was true when the opponent said that the 4 of them couldn't escape. "The 4 of you, answer my questions. I may let you go." Emperor God Xie Xian smiled maliciously. "Dream on." Qing Hao humphed coldly. He knew that the opponent was from outside Green Fire World, and he had wicked ideas in his mind. He naturally wasn't willing to cooperate. "Hehe, a person of integrity." Emperor God Xie Xian scoffed and pointed casually with his fingertip. There was a light that burst out and instantly pierced the head of the favored one from Immortal Palace. Then, his aura vanished into thin air. "Brother Qing Hao." The other 3 next to him looked distressed. "As your senior has died, it's your turn now. Answer my questions honestly, or die like your senior did. Make your own choice." Emperor God Xiezin's voice was cold. With his measure of an Emperor God expert, 3 universe gods who were inexperienced naturally couldn't withstand it. They immediately gave him all the answers that he wanted on a silver platter. Green Fire World is a big world. After finding out about Green Fire World, even Emperor God Xie Xian was shocked. The ancient battlefield that he was in had never had any other cultivators, but him alone wandering there. But then, he had realized that there was a big world in the ancient battlefield, and the big world seemed to be nurtured from the battlefield, a big world that was nurtured from the ancient battlefield. Just how terrifyingly valuable was the world? That's not right. Emperor God Xie Xian shook his head. The spiritual influence of heaven and earth here in the ancient battlefield is so much more intense. The cultivation environment was much more outstanding than the 10 cultivation sanctuaries. On top of that, the ancient battlefield is a land of opportunities. Just how strong were the experts from Green Fire World? Emperor God Xie Xian became alert at the first instant. With such outstanding cultivation environment, the overall power of a cultivator shouldn't be any weaker. Who is the strongest person in Green Fire World? How strong is he? Emperor God Xie Xian asked straightforwardly. One of the disciples from Immortal Palace answered. The strongest person in Green Fire World is naturally the Wuxia City Master. He built Wuxia City himself, and it is no doubt the #1 sanctuary. Countless experts fought to cultivate in Wuxia City. However, rules applied. Although Green Fire World has 9 top forces, none of the 9 top forces dare to go against Wuxia City Master's command. He is widely acknowledged as the strongest one. As for Wuxia City Master's power, no one knew. We only knew that our masters, or even our master's master, said that they aren't Wuxia Master's match. At which level are your master and your master's master at? Emperor God Xie Xian continued to question them. Our master is a void real god. As for our master's master, the master of Immortal Palace, he was an eternal real god, the top eternal real god. The disciple from Immortal Palace answered honestly. Emperor God Xie Xian heard the disciple from Immortal Palace's answer, and he was surprised. The palace master of one of the 9 top forces is only an eternal real god? How could he be so weak? Emperor God Xie Xian was confused, but then he finally understood after a round of questions. Haha, I see. It turned out that Green Fire World had only started evolving in the past 10,000 years. The cultivation environment here was terrible. They didn't even have any universe gods. Then somehow or other, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth became more intense. On top of that, the expert from Green Fire World somehow received some cultivation guidance. Hence, the experts in Green Fire World slowly grew. No wonder. In such an outstanding cultivation environment, the palace master of one of the 9 forces is only an eternal real god. Emperor God Xie Xian smiled, and his smile looked malicious. There was boundless surprise in his eyes too. Great, that's great. Even heaven is helping me. Previously, I found the ancient battlefield that was totally sealed off from eternal chaotic world. Then, I found another big world that possesses great potential. An Emperor God Xie Xian naturally could tell the value of Green Fire World. Although Green Fire World had yet to develop, it was like a newborn baby. It required time to slowly grow. Once it was fully grown, it was simply unimaginable how great of a level it would reach. Emperor God Xie Xian found out about the situation of Green Fire World, and instantly had many wicked ideas pop into his head. Conquer Green Fire World, and make Green Fire World into his private backyard. Let's go. Let's head to Green Fire World. Emperor God Xie Xian immediately forced the 3 disciples from Immortal Palace to lead the way to Green Fire World. In the beginning, he was worried about the standard of the experts in Green Fire World. But now he didn't care much. Even Palace Master from the 9 strongest forces was merely eternal real god level. The so-called Supreme Wuxia City Master couldn't be that powerful. From Emperor God Xiazin's point of view, Wuxia City Master would at most be a chaotic real god. He reckoned that he shouldn't be the top among chaotic real gods as well. As for Almighty, Emperor God Xie Xian didn't consider that at all. There weren't many almighties from eternal chaotic world. It wasn't a level that one could easily achieve. Even if Wuxia City Master had already broken through and become an almighty, he wouldn't care. One should know that he was an emperor god. Plus, as he had wandered in the ancient battlefield for over 12,000 years, he was very powerful. Hence, he didn't bother much. Just a green fire world, he could overtake it easily alone. Very soon, Emperor God had reached the entrance of Green Fire World and Green Fire Palace, under the lead of the disciples from Immortal Palace. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.